Happy New Year and welcome to the Sheldon and Duffy preview for UFC Fight Night 249, Dern versus Hebus 2, also known as UFC Vegas 101. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of SureDog.com, and with me, as usual, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the SureDog Radio Network. Keith, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, because I know you and your family definitely celebrate. How you been?
Yeah, I'm great, brother. I like you say as usual. It's been a whole year since we did a show. There you go. There's your dad joke already.
I gotta say, we're dads. Get the dad jokes in there. Yep.
My 9-year-old son had so much fun with that he wanted to play video games. It was like January 1st, and I setting him up for that joke to say it in front of my wife, and I'm like, Robbie, get off the video games. He's like, Dad, I haven't played since last year. He was so proud of his first dad joke.
You got it. Awesome.
Yeah, man. Christmas was fun. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all our listeners. Happy New Year. I'm excited to get into the fights. Did you do anything special during our break?
Not in particular. Just kind of relaxed, recharged. Didn't think about fights too much. Followed the college football bowl season. You know how it is.
Yeah, mine was a little different, a little hectic. A lot of wrestling this past weekend. A lot of wrestling. My son wrestled. I think he had 10 matches this weekend, so he got a lot. He got a lot in. I went up to Canada, where my wife is from, and it's always crazy up there. She has like the biggest family. There'll be legit 40 people in the house at one time. It's insane. Luckily, they have a pretty big house, and then we get to do some fun stuff when they had a lot of snow. So we went snowmobiling. I went snowshoeing, which I've never done before, which was really fun. Kids got to ride some horses because they got a farm up there and stuff. But everything was great, except I almost died.
Oh,
yeah, okay. Yeah. So this is a good story time with Keith. So my wife's younger brother, he's building a house. Like he's physically building a house. Like he's a very handy guy. So me and my oldest daughter went up and helped him. He's got his own sawmill. So he cuts down trees and then saws them, like makes his own lumber. Like he's hardcore.
This is the most Canadian shit I've ever heard, but please.
Oh
continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they kept saying like we celebrate. It was December 26th. Like we're having a big Christmas dinner because not everyone could get there Christmas Day. So December 26th is when we were doing the big deal. And we're like 30, 35 of us. And he's like, "Oh, I want you to meet." I think he said his name. I want to say it's Chad was the guy's name. And he's like, he traps game, and then he like cuts off the fur, and he makes he's like fur trader or some shit. He sends.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, 2 minutes ago, when I said something was the most Canadian shit I'd ever heard, that is now second place.
Yeah.
You know, a literal fur trapper, like
fur
trapping
trapper.
some pelts, like it's 1795.
Yeah, and he cuts off the fur and he kills the animals. He cuts off the fur and sorry for any PETA people out there. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll meet this guy. But I'm thinking I'm going to go in and there's going to be like bear rugs hanging and like it was going to be like a store because he's like, oh, that's what he does. Like it's his job. I'm thinking it's going to be like a storefront. We go in and like people like kill a deer and they bring it in there and he like cuts off the fur. His wife makes like when they get the antlers and they like dye them. You see when they dye them like white or like really nice looking. No, that's not how this was. This is like some Jeffrey Dahmer type shit. We go in this big, huge barn. We go in, and it is like it felt like an episode of like Seven. Like I was in like the movie Seven, or I was in Silence of the Lambs or some shit. It was like dark, and I go in, and there's just dead animals everywhere. If you're listening to this at home and you're imagining like a big barn of dead animals, there was way more dead animals than you can imagine. I look down, there's 3 freaking mole things right next to my feet. There's a dead badger just laying on the ground. He has, what do you call them? Hides or whatever they're called? Like just
hides.
Yeah. Over my head, like piles of them just over my head. And then he has, I don't know what you would call it, but he has like this board and it's got like 1,000 little tacks that he tacks all the fur up. And then eventually he turns the freaking animal. He rips all the guts out. Oh, sorry, I apologize if somebody is mortified by this because I was mortified. He takes it and he turns it inside out, and then he tacks it up. So not only is there dead animals, but there's dead inside out animals. Like I'm seeing the inside of their skin, and it's just like 12, 14 fisher cats just hanging from the sky. Right? He has freezers just full of dead animals. He's like, oh yeah, don't step over there. Those are all traps. Like that, I want you to hit like step in a trap and like lose your toe and shit. But that wasn't the worst thing. I'm talking to this guy and I'm saying, this is fucking Jeffrey Dahmer. Like this guy definitely killed somebody. This guy's nuts. And then I just look down and these two like barrels of, like a liquid barrel thing.
Yeah.
Of just dead animal parts. He just threw all like piles of dead animals in this thing. Dude, I never wanted to leave so fast out of place. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is like the Hills Got Eyes type shit. Like me and my daughter are gonna get murdered right now. So, and that's still not as crazy as the freaking Patriots winning a meaningless game and losing the first pick in the draft. So anyways,
yeah.
Let's talk about fights.
And for those listening at home and marveling at this story, keep in mind that Keith deals with murders of humans as like his daily job.
I think he was gonna get me. This guy was a weird dude.
Wow.
So shout out to, I said, no one knows his name, but they'll know his name one day because I mean he's got some dead bodies in some freezes and shit.
Wow.
It's so much darker and scarier than you're imagining right now.
I believe it because I'm laughing right now, but I'm sure if I was there, I would have just been
with my 14-year-old daughter who is like already kind of shy, and I'm like, she must be terrified of this guy. And this guy was like, oh, then I asked him, so how long you been doing this? And he's like 45. I think he's gonna be like, oh, 20 years. He's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this since I was 5. Like my grandfather did this, and he taught me how to do it. I'm like, wait a minute, you were killing fucking little animals before you knew the ABCs? What the hell?
That's something, man.
This is the best part. I asked him, I'm like, oh yeah, like how much do you get for these hikes? I'm trying to be nice so the guy won't murder me. And he's like, oh, there's no money in this. Like I do it for fun. He's like, yeah, this is like a side hobby. Like this is like a side hobby.
All right, now that sounds like
I forgot that little detail. I just do it for fun.
Okay, wow. I don't even know what to say to that. Here's a segue for you. Speaking of slaughtering the defenseless, 14 fights on this card, including the widest betting line of the year, might be right now, very first card of the year.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
The favorite is still not as crazy as Chad.
General thoughts on this card? Obviously it is headlined by a rematch that I don't think anyone was particularly clamoring for, but their first fight was 5.5 years ago. They're both somewhat different fighters since then. It's Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas. South of that, it's a 14 fight Apex card. I mean,
yeah. So again, you got to compare it to the Apex cards. It's not going to compare it to pay-per-view. So it's on its own category. So this is like the lowest category. You got the Apex card. I like it though, man. There's a lot of fights, and I wonder if it's just that, like, what do they say? Like, I know what's a stupid saying? Like, if you've been missing thing, you kind of like romanticize it.
Yeah. Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, there you go. That's why you're the brains of this. You're the brains, and I'm the looks.
Exactly.
So the headline isn't the best. It's not a rematch I don't think anybody really cared about, but it's pretty deep. There's some good prospects. Like I give it like an A-, man. I'm actually pretty excited.
It's the same here. And one thing I'll say is every month or so, Sherdog will put out an article that we just call it the hit list, but it is a list of all the undefeated fighters in the UFC. And anytime
Chad had a hit list too. There's gonna be a lot of Chad jokes.
Which is a okay by me. And every time we put it out, whenever I'm the one doing the scheduling of it on social media, I'll just put it on Facebook and say, hey, there are 27 undefeated fighters in the UFC right now. How many can you name without looking? And hell, I talk about this stuff every week. I'm probably more likely to know all the fighters on UFC roster as just about anybody, and I can never keep track of them. There are 4 undefeated fighters on this card, and some of them are, they're just people that haven't run into the right person yet, but all 4 of the undefeated fighters on this card, Nurullo, Aliev, Magomed, Gadzhiyasulov, Kobe Smith, and Austin Bashi, they're all decent to excellent prospects. I mean, I don't think all 4 of them are going to be ranked fighters in their divisions 2 years from now, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were. Like, none of them are chumps. So you're right in that this card is loaded with some very solid prospects. There are no real terrible fights throughout. I mean, when you got Thiago, Moises, and Trey Ogden on the prelims, it's a pretty deep card.
My only knock. So again, the headline I think could have been a little better, and another reason why I'm like not giving it an A+ or anything is I feel like the UFC should have opened the year with a pay-per-view, like start off big, just like the same thing I said in the last preview. Like I thought they should have ended the year with the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So other than that, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, but instead they closed out the year with what was very obviously a contractual obligations card, and this is another one. There are probably 3 or 4 fighters on this card who won on the Contender Series last fall and are just getting their first fight in the UFC now.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
So if all those people are owed 3 fights this year, or 6 fights in the next 3 years, or 4 fights in the next 2 years, or whatever it is, the UFC just needs to get right on it. Any other general thoughts on this one before we jump in?
No, it's going to be a long preview. Let's get into it.
First fight out of the gate at UFC Vegas 101 is a lightweight contest between Nurullo Aliev and Joe Solecki. Aliev, the 25-year-old from Tajikistan, is a perfect 9-0 as a professional. He's a perfect 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series all the way back in fall of 2022. He fought in 2023, so almost 2 years ago at this point, taking a majority decision over Rafael Alves, sat out the rest of 2023, all of 2024. He had at least one fight canceled that he withdrew from. Like, he's had a variety of like little injuries and illnesses, but however he got here, almost 2 years since his last fight, he steps in. He was supposed to fight Yanal Ashmos. Ashmos withdrew a week or 2 ago. In steps Joe Solecki. Solecki, 31-year-old from New Jersey, 13-5 overall, 5-3 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He comes into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak, including his lone cage appearance of last year. He fought at UFC 302 last June, dropped a unanimous decision to Grant Dawson. Prior to that, he fought just a little over a year ago against Drakkar Klose, got slammed, injured. I think he came up hurting his ribs, but yeah, slam, knockout by Drakkar Klose in the first round. So he hasn't actually won a fight in almost 2 years, almost exactly the same amount of time as it's been since Aliev has been away. Aliev, big favorite here. Not the biggest on the card, but a big one. He is minus 425, Solecki plus 325.
Wow.
I already threw out my general opinion that all 4 of the undefeated fighters on this card are solid to excellent prospects. That obviously would include Aliev. Tell me whether you agree or not, and who you think wins this one.
Yeah, I'll say 3. There's one that I'm not that high on, and we'll get to that. And not Aliev. Aliev is the one I like, but I'll say this: this is a step up in competition, facing a guy like Joe Solecki, a good veteran who's pretty crafty. Yeah, I mean, he lost to Grant Dawson in his last fight, and the Drakkar Klose, I feel like, was a little bit more of a, obviously a home run hit by Drakkar Klose, but I feel like if he fought Drakkar Klose 10 times, like that's going to be a pretty even fight. So yeah, it only lasted a minute, but I think he's better than a guy that is on a 2-fight losing streak, in his appearance. And there's such a different style between him and Ashmus is a guy who throws a lot of big shots and then looks to wrestle, while Solecki is more of a volume guy. And instead of like wrestling style, he's more of a grappler, finish the fight quick with subs. So changing style makes it tough. Solecki's a guy that he fights out of both stances. He's got a lot of volume. He overwhelms guys with volume. He's a pretty technically sound boxer. Attacks with combinations, sets up shots well with feints, throws straight shots down the pipe. Not the biggest hitter. Doesn't have a lot of power. He throws kicks to the body, especially if his opponent is in the opposite stance. If Solecki's switching stances, he's a pretty solid wrestler. Like I just said, he's not the wrestler, but I mean he's. It's not that he's not your NCAA level wrestler, but yeah, he can get the fight to the ground, and he's more of a guy. He wants to create a scramble, and he's good at winning scrambles. Now he's not a good defensive wrestler, and he doesn't mind getting taken down because like he likes playing jiu-jitsu. But like he showed against Grant Dawson, if you're a big, strong, powerful wrestler, he can be held down. He struggles to get back up. But if he can get you to like transition with him scramble, he's a really good grappler. I mean, I know he's been saying like he's one of these guys when he comes out, they say, oh, he's been training BJJ since he was 6. He's got 8 subs. The reason why he lost it close is he got close to his back and then kind of rushed and fell off, and that's when Jakar close slammed him. He's shown flexibility, to look for subs off his back. The one concern is he has this very fast pace that he's gassed out in the past. Like probably his one of the worst showings of his career was against Jared Gordon in a really grappling heavy fight. Aliev, like, yeah, he's been out for a while, but he's only 24. So, like, I love that. He looked fantastic in his UFC debut. He's a really good athlete. He's a decent striker. He works behind a nice jab, throws straight shots down the pipe. Also not the biggest puncher, in the sense of power. He ultimately has, that, Nurullo, Aliev, he's going to be able to grapple. He closes the distance. He grinds in the clinch. He's a very solid wrestler. He likes upper body takedowns, good control on top, mean ground and pound. Not a submission artist. He doesn't have a sub in his record. So obviously if this fight ends by submission, you expect Solecki to get it. I think the line is off. I think it's hard to pick Aliev. I think he's good and he's been out for a while and he's at that age where he can make bigger improvements, but this is a step up in competition. It's hard to pick Solecki because he's taken the fight on such short notice. His game is surrounded having a big gas tank. I wonder if he has that. And, so it has me leaning towards Aliev. I say he lands some shots on his feet. He mixes some takedowns. He controls on top, especially controls with Solecki, gasses himself out. Give me Aliev by decision.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you laid out there, and you nailed what the main dynamic of the fight is to me. I would favor Nurullo alive, and no matter what. He's younger, bigger, more athletic, and unlike Solecki, he has one standout skill that he can actually control and take over a fight with. I would feel a lot better about Solecki having possible upset value if this were not short notice. He's the kind of guy.
I gotta interrupt you a second. I love how you say his name Aliev like 10 times, and I straight start calling him the wrong name. Like we have this very John Anik DC things going on where you're so professional, you have it down, and I just say whatever name I want to. I'm calling him like freaking medicine name. And all right, continue. Sorry.
It's what the fans tune in for. So yeah, I'd feel better about Solecki as a little bit of a flyer because coming in totally fresh, he's exactly the kind of guy that could be a trap fight for a prospect like Nurullo alive. But I'm with you. Even if he hasn't shown himself to be much of a submission threat, his wrestling and just very methodical, I hate saying safe, but just position first, ground and pound second, submission a distant third is kind of his book once he has someone down. Like when he's taking people down, generally the round is over. And I could see him doing that to Solecki in 2 rounds out of 3, and the fight's as simple as that. So give me Nurullo alive to get 2025 off to a good start for himself, at least, if not this night of fights, with a decision win as well. We head now to the women's flyweight division and a matchup of 2 fighters looking to bounce back from their first career losses in the form of Fatima Kline and Victoria Dudakova. Kline, the 24-year-old New Yorker, is 6-1 overall. She is 0-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing CFFC flyweight champ. She made her UFC debut back in July at UFC on ESPN Namajunas versus Cortez, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Jasmine Jasudavicius. She will look to bounce back from that, again, her first career loss, against Dudakova. Dudakova, 25-year-old Russian, 8-1 overall. She is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. Notably, she is 2-1 in the UFC. The first 2 fights were at strawweight. She is 0-1 at flyweight as she fought Sam Hughes last August at UFC on ABC Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov and dropped a split decision. Prior to that, she had UFC wins over Jinh Fry and Estela Nunes. Odds on this one, I mentioned that there was a fight on this card that may have the widest betting line of 2025 in the UFC, all sewn up right out of the gate, as Kline is minus 950, Dudakova plus 600, and minus 950 is bargain shopping. Kline is greater than minus 1,000 on several books, and she's minus 1,200 on one.
Wow.
Here's my thing. Fatima Kline is going to get plenty of shine and plenty of chances from the UFC, as she is the primary training partner of Erin Blanchfield. But if Erin Blanchfield was fighting Dudakova, he'd probably be around a minus 900 favorite. And I'd be like, okay, that kind of makes sense.
Wow.
Like, do I think Kline is a better fighter? Absolutely. And I think she's a better fighter in specific ways that are not going to be great news for Dudakova. But again, two such young and unproven flyweights, I would never completely discount the upset value in a massive underdog like this. But here's the thing, Kline is, like I said, she's Erin Blanchfield's primary training partner, and in a lot of ways, she kind of resembles her a little bit. She's an outstanding grappler and a good enough wrestler, not a lights out athlete, but definitely very strong and coordinated. She clearly views her striking as a work in progress, but at this point in her development, it's really just a means to an end. Really get close enough that she can get her hands on her opponent, find a way to get that opponent to the ground, and then go to work. That, in my book, would leave her. Well, it ran her into trouble against Jasmine Jasudavicius, because Jasudavicius was not just easily the best fighter she's fought, but by far the best wrestler and probably the biggest, strongest woman. And Kline just couldn't make her game go against Jasudavicius. I don't think she's going to have that problem against Dudakova. Dudakova does all the right things. She's aggressive. She's fairly athletic. She has decent skills in isolation. Like, she's not a bad striker. If she can get fights to the ground on her terms, like where, when, and how she wants, she is a tricky grappler. She racked up submissions on overmatched opponents, but everything Dudakova does well plays right into Kline's wheelhouse. And more to the point, Dudakova, for a fighter who is 8-1, so I mean, she's literally only lost once. She's been in more trouble than she needs to be against really badly overmatched fighters, even when she was fighting over in Russia. Like, she's aggressive on the ground, but it's left her, it's allowed her opponents to sweep or escape. She gets tagged up on the feet routinely by less skilled fighters than herself. After I just made a big deal about how crazy this line is, I do think Kline wins this one pretty easily. And given that Dudakova's kind of safe place is exactly where Kline wants the fight, I don't think this is making it to the final horn either. Give me Kline by second round stoppage. I'm picturing a submission, just catches Dudakova being silly, being wild, being unguarded in transition, takes her back and chokes her out. But I could also see her pounding her out. But give me second round finish here.
Yeah, I was really surprised when you said that line. I mean, you know how I feel about lines that are like negative 900 or whatever you say in my historical type lines. And if anybody's new, I don't think anybody's New Year's resolution was to get more a Shill and a Duffy show in their life. But if this is your first time listen, we're not a betting show. Ben does the odds, but not one of those like, oh, can't miss, put 3 units on this guy or that guy. You know, that's not us. But so don't take anything I say about betting. Like, don't follow my advice. But I hate, like, if I was better, I would bet the other way. And maybe that's the sucker's bet. Maybe that's why. I'm surprised she's that big of a favorite because she lost her last fight. You know, she lost her UFC debut. And I don't know much about betting and definitely not about the, you know, line movement or anything like that. But if Dudakova has one judge change their opinion on a fight up in weight, I think this is the line would be probably pretty close because you put that 0 in the loss column, instantly you get so much more hype.
Yeah.
So the thing about Dudakova is she's only 25 years old. I mean, she's far from a finished product. So, I mean, she was one who she came in the UFC. She had a lot of hype. And now she's like this big an underdog. I'm very surprised at that. She's big for the weight class. I'd say she's a plus athlete. She's a bit of a brawler on the feet. A little wild. There's a lot of like looping punches. She tends to telegraph and kind of load up a little bit too much. But she throws hard shots. She uses those hard shots to get opportunities to close the distance where she likes to use her size in the clinch. She's pretty good plumb clinch, you know, striking. She'll look for some takedowns inside. You know, ultimately she does want to get the fight to the ground. She likes some judo throws, some foot sweeps. Her outside entries are just okay. A lot of times she'll shoot without a setup. If she gets the fight to the ground, she's got a good top game. She's got 4 subs on her record. She will rush subs that aren't there, and that's an issue. And she kind of gassed out against Sam Hughes a little bit and probably course to the fight and moving back down in weight. I don't think that helps a gas tank. Kline, I said all this about the line, and then I'm like, well, Kline's only 24, so I love that. She was a highly regarded prospect who got a stud in her UFC debut. You know how I feel about Jasmine Jasovich. I think she's like grossly underrated.
And it's not even us now. I believe she's in the UFC's own top 10. I mean, to go straight from CFFC to a top 10 flyweight, that's a hell of a step up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. And Jasovich, you know, we've been kind of on her as like, she's a tough out for anybody. She's got that it's never going to be pretty style, but she's going to make it into a fight. Kline's, she's athletic. She can fight out of both stances. Pretty technical striker on the feet. She fights behind a high guard defense. Uses, you know, she's a lot of pressure in her striking. Good boxing, good volume, quick hands, attacks with combinations. Has some power. Got a good kicking game. Adds kicks into her combos. She's got a fast high kick. She can also battle in the clinch. Nice knees inside. She's a decent offensive wrestler. I like her entries. She likes some body lock takedowns. She's a BJJ black belt, competes in a lot of BJJ tournaments, kind of like you mentioned with Erin Blanchfeld style and that. Good top game, works to get to a better position on the ground. She does need to improve her takedown defense. Losing Jasmine Jasovich is not a bad thing, but she made a mistake at one point, and I'm like, I'm keeping this in my notes forever. She was reaching back when Jasovich was behind her, and that's like 8U wrestling mistake. So, like my son's 10U, and he don't make that mistake anymore, you know. And she's got good cardio. I'm really surprised by the matchup, just in general with Kline. I mean, they're both young prospects. You kind of bury the loser, being that they both lost their last fight, especially if it's Kline, being that she's such a favorite now. I do think the line it should be much closer based on Dudakova just can get moments in the fight where she's winning with volume or winning with takedowns. But I'm like you. I still like Kline here. I love her boxing. I love her hand speed. Losing Jasovich just doesn't, get me off her bandwagon. I say she uses movement to avoid some takedowns. Give me Kline by decision.
Next up at UFC Vegas 101 is a light heavyweight matchup between Magomed Gadzhiyasulov and Bruno Lopes. Gadzhiyasulov, the 31-year-old Dagestani, is 9-0 as a professional. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He made his debut in the UFC back in June of last year at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Aliskerov, where he took a majority decision over Brenjison Ribeiro. He's going to look to make it 2 in a row, go 10-0 as a pro against Lopes. 31-year-old Brazilian is 13-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He has been on the Contender Series twice. He fought on season 7 back in 2023, getting knocked out in the first round by Brenjison Ribeiro, incidentally. Came back last August and knocked out Mikel Saginiani in the second round. That got him signed, where he steps in here as a moderate underdog. Gadzhiyasulov is minus 220, Lopes plus 170. It's very tempting to go to the MMA math here, since these two guys have an opponent in common. They both fought Brenjison Ribeiro. They both fought him within the last year and a half or so. And one of them, Gadzhiyasulov, beat him. Lopes got knocked out by him. I don't think that tells the whole story, but for me, I think Gadzhiyasulov, I think both these guys are solid prospects. Like I think Lopes, win or lose here, is probably going to stick around the UFC for a minute, especially considering how depleted the light heavyweight division is right now. But having said that, I think Gadzhiyasulov is better than him everywhere. So I'm kind of looking at, okay, what are things Lopes does that could make things interesting? It's worth noting that in Gadzhiyasulov's fight against Brenjison Ribeiro last summer, he struggled with leg kicks. Like, Ribeiro tore his legs up in the first round to the point that he was hobbling, switching stances. Even though I thought Gadzhiyasulov won the first round, if you paused right there and asked me, I would have said, there's a chance that Ribeiro turns things around and pulls off the upset. What happened instead was Ribeiro started to get tired, stopped doing leg kicks. Gadzhiyasulov started taking him down easily, and it was academic from there. Gadzhiyasulov is from that breed of Dagestani fighter that is a good wrestler when called upon to do so, but if he can conduct an entire fight on the feet and win that way, he would be just as happy to. I'm kind of like, I don't know, a poor man's Magomed and Aliev that way. Lopes does try leg kicks. He's used them to pretty good effect in all of his last couple of fights. He used them to set up his last opponent for some nasty body work. So there are some things he could do to Gadzhiyasulov, but the fact that Gadzhiyasulov is a good wrestler and will just kind of have that safety valve if he does start getting stuff he doesn't like on the feet from Lopes makes me feel pretty comfortable taking him here. If Gadzhiyasulov steps on the gas, I think he probably knocks Lopes out, either knocks him out on the feet or hurts him on the feet, falls him to the ground, finishes it there. I don't know if he'll get going that early or that aggressively. So I'm taking Gadzhiyasulov by decision here, but I think it's one of those decisions where he probably wins all 3 rounds and makes it look pretty elementary.
Yeah, I was trying to so the reason why I give this such a high grade, I was trying to look at the card and say, what fight am I least interested in? And it might be this fight. There's people on the card I'm least interested in seeing, but the fight itself is like an action fight. If that makes sense, people I'm not as high on, but I know it's going to be a really fun fight. For example, Medic versus Soriano, that'll be the freaking banger. But I'm not that high on either guy. So I'm looking around and I'm like, dang, this might really be the fight that I'm least interested in. I mean, not counting Abdul Razak Al Hassan. I'm done with that guy. I mean, he could land a haymaker, but I still think I'd probably rather watch a pie eating contest between the two girls on the Oprah show that had the chick had 2 heads. I'd rather see them have a pie eating contest than see Al Hassan fight anymore. But I think you might be a little higher on these guys than I am. They're okay. I give them a C. Gadzhiyasulov, he's huge for the weight class. I mean, the guy looks like a heavyweight. He's a pretty good striker. He can fight out of both stances. He's fast. Got some quick hands, pretty explosive. Nice jab. Got a good left hook. He attacks with combination. Throws a lot of kicks. Hard kicks to the body. A good high kick. Love the spinning back elbow that he hit on the Contender Series. He has some defensive issues. First, he keeps his chin way too high in the air. He also doesn't check leg kicks. Ribeiro, I can't remember the guy's first name. He fought, really beat him up with Brenton. Yeah, Brenton Ribeiro beat him up with calf kicks in that fight. He will look to wrestle a lot, but I think you put his wrestling much higher than I do. I don't think he's like that good at it, and like just because he has a Russian name, like don't expect Bo Nicolle out there. I mean, he's not that, like, he'll look for wrestling, but he's not that good at it. He's a weak defensive wrestler. If he ends up on top, he does have some strong ground. But I mean, like you, he's an explosive kind of person. Lopes, he's a former LFA champion, which I like that. Obviously, that's always been like one of the the best organizations domestically to help out the UFC. He can fight out of both stances. Not a great athlete though. He's pretty flat-footed. He throws way too many single strikes. I like that he throws straight shots on the pipe. He finished, his an opponent recently with a body shot, which I like. He avoids strikes though by backing straight up, which is an issue. And he's been hurt a lot of his career, including his last fight. I like that he throws some stepping knees and has some hard calf kicks. He will sneak in a takedown, but again, he's also not a wrestler at all. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He's hard to hold down. He's got a good get-up game. He's got 5 subs on his record. He loves like head and arm triangle chokes. So again, I'm not as high as either of these guys as you are. I am picking Gadzhiyasulov because he's bigger. He's a better athlete. I think he has the advantage on the feet. I think he's faster. I don't think he's going to get finished, though. I say he wins by unanimous decision.
We head back to the women's flyweight division as Ernesta Kareckaite faces off against Nicolle Caliari. Kareckaite, the 26-year-old Lithuanian, is 5-1-1 overall. She's 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. She fought just once last year. It was at UFC 301, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Dione Barbosa in her UFC debut. She will look to bounce back from that, her first career loss against Caliari. A 28-year-old Brazilian is 8-2 overall. This will be her UFC debut. She fought on the Contender Series last September, tapping out Corinne Laframboise in the first round. Odds here favor the Lithuanian pretty heavily. Kareckaite is -300, Caliari +250. I'm not sure why Ernesta Kareckaite is in the UFC, to be honest. And I'm not saying she won't stick. Kind of like what I just said about light heavyweight a fight ago. This is women's flyweight. They are desperate for new blood, which seems weird since we had this kind of trio or quartet of super prospects that hit the UFC 4 or 5 years ago, but already they're desperately in need of bodies. So I think she's going to stick around, but I'm not sure what McMaynard saw in her that caused him to pull her onto the Contender Series. Here's the thing with Kareckaite. She looks like a potential elite flyweight. Like, she's big, tall, rangy, has a muscular build. Like, she looks like a good fighter. And in a vacuum, she has some of the skills of a good fighter, but she really, really struggles to win rounds. I mean, she won her first couple of fights by knockout that I haven't even been able to find tape on, then disappeared for almost 2 full years from the sport. Since she came back, she has a draw and 3 straight split decisions before joining the UFC. Then she ran into Dione Barbosa and she lost a unanimous decision to Barbosa, but I thought Kareckaite might have won that fight. And looking at MMA decisions, almost half of the media members watching scored it for Kareckaite. The problem is that Kareckaite
how did Drake Rick score?
I'm sure.
Whatever he scored, it's the opposite. That's who won. That's who should have won.
The old thing about like Nam fan picking fights, like just
there you go.
And she has a lot of the kind of habits that normally make a round winner. Like, she's aggressive. She comes right forward. She throws enough volume. Like, so many women's flyweight fights, you're just screaming for anyone to throw a 2 or 3 punch combination. She doesn't have that problem. She comes right forward, throws good volume. unless she's interrupted in doing so, she has enough cardio to throw that volume for all 3 rounds. I mean, in a better world, she'd be a very, very poor woman's Caitlin Chikagian / Sermonara, but she has trouble winning fights because her aggression coming forward, being tall with long legs, she has terrible takedown defense. So anybody that doesn't like getting pity patted up tends to be able to take her down. I mean, Carly Judice took her down a couple times, and Carly Judice is a boxer. And her takedown defense would be even worse if not for the fact that she grabs the fence every single damn time someone gets on her hips. Like, I don't know if they have her fighting in like an 8-foot cage or something, but she's always able to grab a piece of the fence. I think she's probably better than Caliari. She's definitely much, much bigger, but it's really hard to take her as a favorite when you know that you're probably in for either a split decision or a unanimous decision that maybe shouldn't have been unanimous. Caliari, short, compact, powerfully built, also a striker by preference, but at least regionally in Brazil, she showed herself able and willing to take people down if it came to it. Her only loss that's really relevant to right now is when she lost to Kay Hansen and Invicta, and Hansen, even shorter, even stockier, more powerful, better athlete, really, really out wrestled her and out hustled her on the ground badly. Kareckaite is not going to do that to her, but Caliari might be able to do that sort of thing to her. I mean, we're talking about someone who is a primary training partner of Marina Rodriguez. So when she sees like kind of a tall, lanky person who wants to kickbox her at distance, she's used to dealing with someone who's much, much better at that. And while Marina Rodriguez's takedown defense has always been her Achilles heel, it's better than Kareckaite's. I'm talking myself into the upset here. I'm not hugely sold on either of these women. Like I said, I think they'll both stick around just because women's flyweight needs them. But give me Caliari to eke it out here. And while I almost never predict fights to be a split decision, considering that half of Kareckaite's career fights have ended in split decision or draw, and the way it's going to be where Caliari's probably going to be losing rounds until or unless she takes Kareckaite down, I see a split decision here. Give me the Brazilian in what will actually be a pretty substantial upset.
Nice. I think you don't like Kareckaite because she's everything we aren't. You're like, she's tall, she's good looking, she's athletic, she's ripped.
She's young.
She's young.
Yeah. That's exactly
everything opposite of the Shilling and Duffy show.
There would be a lot of fighters I'd hate if I were so petty. Like, damn, Mackenzie Dern, I hate talking about her. Yeah. I've never been like, on the cover of Maxim, like,
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. That's 2025, right? New Year's resolution. Let's go.
Goals.
Yeah. Kareckaite, I mean, she's big for the weight class. She's a long and lengthy fighter. Even though she's long and lengthy, she really doesn't fight for distance. She's a pressure striker. She's constantly moving forward. So the one thing that I will say that she's good at, and you mentioned this, but she has insane volume, and she's tough in that sense. Like, to have insane volume means you're gonna have to eat some shots because you're coming forward, you're throwing, and she just overwhelms with volume. She got quick hands, accurate, throws straight shots down the pipe, throws some hard kicks to the body. But she eats so many shots because she lacks head movement and constantly taking ground. She doesn't look to wrestle much. She's a weak defensive wrestler, but she's a better wrestler in space. She can stop some takedowns from space. She just doesn't have balance. She did show, to her credit, against Diane Barbosa, a pretty good fighter. Good sub defense. Like she was getting herself out of different submissions, and she has a really big gas tank. Move over to Caliari. She's got this karate background, though she doesn't fight that way. She's a striker. She's aggressive on on the feet, fast hands, attacks with combinations. She has some good power. She has 5 TKOs. She lacks head movement though, so she's going to eat shots. It's going to be a lot of good fun exchanges. She can grind in the clinch, and that's because she is just absolutely freaking jacked. She likes upper body takedowns, some judo throws. She has 3 subs on her record. She can get subbed off her back. She got a sub in her last fight. And I like this fight a lot. Both girls have had flashes. I think I'm higher on Kareckaite than you are. She does have a really big size advantage. Her volume is a lot. She's got you mentioned she's going to have to avoid takedowns from Caliari, and man, I'm with you, man. I'm really on the fence. Like, I think the line, this should be a pick 'em. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Kareckaite, but I'm having zero confidence. I just think I like her volume. She's going to have to avoid the takedowns. She's going to have to avoid the submissions, but give me Kareckaite by decision. But again, I'm with you. Like, this line is way off.
All right, we have our first disagreement of 2025. And oh, by the way, that reminds me, and I'll say this on the hot mic so that the viewers know, what I want to do at the end of this year is do a year wrap-up show where it doesn't have to be a 3-hour extravaganza, but maybe just over the holiday we get together for like 60 to 90 minutes and just go over like, here's how our unanimous upset picks of 2025 turned out. We'll each get a sec to maybe talk about our best and worst picks of the year. Okay. We don't usually brag on stuff, but our lad in Ireland, Sean Sheehan, did that because he does our betting shows, and so it was and he did a show where he fessed up to his worst picks of the year. He took a little shine for some good picks he made, and it just made for a really fun show. So remind us if you're watching this as the year. Yeah.
Who's that guy? I can't think of his name. This is a shame because sometimes my brain doesn't work where you have to think about Bellator and PFL and that whole thing. Who's that Irish guy who just beat AJ McKee? He's fighting Nurullo.
Paul Hughes.
I'll say this. Sean was on Paul Hughes for a long time. And he was, there was a lot of people were counting Paul Hughes out against AJ McKee, and he looked fantastic.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Like,
but he's also high on every Irish guy, so whatever.
Yeah. Well, he should get credit when he's right, because making the call on people like Sean O'Bannon did not pan out for him. So
yeah, there you go.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 249. Oh man, poor Preston Parsons. We've got Preston Parsons versus Kobe Smith at welterweight. Parsons, the 29-year-old Floridian, is 11-5 overall. He's 2-3 in the UFC, having alternated losses and wins throughout his UFC run. He's coming in off of a loss. He fought most recently at UFC 304 last July, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Oban Elliott. His only other cage appearance of last year was almost a full year ago, where he won a unanimous decision over Matthew Semmelsberger. So he will hope to keep the pattern going, get back into the win column here. He had been scheduled to take on the debuting Andreas Gustafsson, but Gustafsson withdrew from the fight a couple weeks ago. In steps Kobe Smith. Jacobe for short, 28-year-old Oklahoman, now fighting out of Texas, is a perfect 9-0 as a pro. This will be his debut. He comes to the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, where he fought last October, as well as Fury Fighting Championship, where he racked up, I think, his last 5 regional wins. I say poor Parsons because Gustafsson was going to be about a -200 favorite against Parsons. He loses Gustafsson and in steps Smith, and Smith is almost twice as big a favorite, as he is -380, Parsons +280. We love our wrestlers, especially Keith. And while Kobe Smith was never a national champ or a multiple-time All-American, he placed in the Big 12, I think, 3 out of his 4 years in school. And he was really close to being an All-American. Like his last 2 years in school.
He did get All-American. Yeah, I think he finished 7th or 8th one year. One thing I'll say is that when Ben just talked about becoming an All-American, they always talk about what's some of the best things to watch in sports, and they'll talk about a lot of people hockey playoffs are I guess, sensational. And I'll tell you, like, the blood round of the NCAA wrestling tournament, and what that means is, so there's 4 matches, there's 12 guys left in the tournament. This round, if you win, you become an All-American. If you lose, you're not. That round is always like that title that you get to carry the rest of your life. Especially if you're like a senior and you've never been there, it is just different saying you're an All-American than, I lost in the blood round. There's some hard-ass wrestle that round.
Or if you're one of the people that was favored to win the whole division and you're trying to salvage anything out of it. I mean, I remember the first NCAA finals that I really paid attention. The first one I went to in person, like Townsend Saunders, who went on to fight in MMA a couple times.
That's way back.
Yeah, it was 1990. It was 1990. He got eliminated, I think, in the second round, even though he was the number 1 seed, and he slaughtered the consolation bracket. He was mad. And I think that was when he decided that if ever the opportunity opened up to get paid for punching people, he would take it. But
there you go.
Yeah, at any rate, Kobe Smith, not at the Bo Nickel, Ed Ruth level, but a guy whose wrestling has definitely translated to the cage seamlessly. Sure. Tell me what you think of him as a prospect, and tell me how you think this fight looks on Saturday.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said, like poor Preston Parsons. I stopped my tape study. Like, this was actually one of the fights that got added like last minute. I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta stop. I think I was gonna take Parsons to beat Gustafsson. Like, I again, I didn't finish my tape study on Gustafsson, so like I might have dig a little deeper, and I like Parsons. I think Parsons is a really well-rounded fighter. Like, he's a good kickboxer, good technique. He's accurate. He throws straight shots down the pipe. Nice pop in his hands. He does work the body well. His left hook to the body is one of his best strikes. I like his lead elbows. He mixes kicks in well with his punching combinations. He's got a big kicking game. He isn't the best defensive striker. That's what keeps him from becoming a higher level guy. He doesn't check leg kicks. He can close the distance and battle and clinch. He's a good striker in the clinch. Nice elbows inside, nice knees inside. He wrestles a lot, which obviously is an issue going against a guy like Kobe Smith. Parsons is pretty good at wrestling. Like, I like his wrestling game. Sometimes he will shoot without a set, which I don't like that. He also shoot and he won't run his feet. What I mean by that is when you're in deep on the legs, he kind of try to lift from his knees instead of like the perfect example is, I've always said, is Josh Koscheck. He, like, for MMA, he just runs his feet so well. He shoots and then he looks for peek outs, which I do love. I'm not gonna explain what a peek out is. You can it's really fun. Just YouTube what a peek out is, and that's something he does. If he gets to the fight of the ground, if
one happens on Saturday, DC will lose his mind.
Oh yeah, so well, he's done
when someone tries an omoplata.
Yeah, and if he does against Kobe Smith, it'd be even more impressive. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's got a good top game, and he's got good submission defense. He stays really calm in some bad some situations. Kobe Smith is, to me, in this season's of the Contender Series. I don't do my Contender Series previews anymore. I wish I did. I simply don't have the time. If this was my full-time job, it was definitely one of the things I would bring back. I really enjoyed digging deep on the prospects, but of just casually watching them instead of like watching all their fights, just watching their fights on Tuesday. Smith is one of my favorite prospects on this past season. He's very athletic. He can fight out of both stances. He fights with a lot of pressure. He has his high guard defense, throwing tight shots. He sometimes overthrows his shots, though, which leaves him open to be countered. He throws some hard kicks, fast high kick, hard calf kicks. He will throw naked calf kicks. He's a power puncher, though. He's got 7 TKOs. He closes the distance, and he can dirty box very well. And we've already talked about he's a really good wrestler. I mean, besides being an All-American, he wrestled at Oklahoma State. I mean, that's a top 5 school. When you come up with who's got the best wrestling, it's Penn State. There's a freaking massive gap, but then there's Iowa, Oklahoma State, Cornell, throwing off the top of my head, throwing some other team, but
all time, Oklahoma State's probably still the greatest. It's either Oklahoma State or Iowa if you talk about
exactly, yeah, but that's like Well, what's the greatest country ever? Like, my man, I guess the Roman. I guess Italy could be if you want to talk about the Roman Empire or something like. I don't, I don't want to lose European listeners, so I got to stop. He's got some good fast entries. He's extremely strong. He gets a limb and they go flying. He's got some nice foot sweeps. He's a good overall grappler, good back takes. He's got really mean ground pound, very like old school Tito Ortiz style, where he's sliding elbows and little gapping spaces. And the one big concern I have about him is because of his wrestling background, and he's a little older for a guy making his debut. Not super old, but was he like 28, 29?
Yeah, he's 28, but he'll be 29 in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't like that, and I'm also worried about his cardio. I mean, he fights at a really fast pace, very explosive style, and then taking the fight on very short notice is concerning. Parsons has been this guy that I've liked for a while. I think he's better than his UFC record is. I think he's well rounded. I think he's a good technical boxer. This is a tough one. I mean, big part of his game is wrestling, and Smith beats him in that department. Smith is the better athlete. He hits harder. I think Parsons has to play the long run in this game, where he has a big cardio advantage. He kind of know he has to worry about the early storm of Smith. Maybe Smith starts slowing down, and then he starts taking over. He starts stuffing some takedowns. Maybe he adds in a takedown late of himself. I think that will happen. I think Parsons will make this a tougher fight than people think. I think that Smith will slow down, but I think Parsons is going to run out of time. I still think Smith holds on to a victory. Give me Smith by decision.
I agree on all points there. And I think you pointed out something that we'll see a hint of it on Saturday, as you kind of predicted, but whenever Kobe Smith takes his first loss, I mean, there's always the chance that he just shoots and runs right into like a knee and just gets, a 1 in a million type KO. But I think it's more likely that a Preston Parsons type just hangs around and outlasts him and takes over late. Like, it's worth noting that Smith's best work in college wrestling happened at 174 pounds, and when he was a senior, he like did half the season at 184, and now he's fighting at 170 with substantially more time in the contest, more stuff he has to worry about. Like, it might come and bite him at some point, but until or unless that happens, he does seem to be a special prospect. Plenty of high-level wrestlers come over to MMA. Not many of them have the diversity of takedown attacks that he does. Like, he has a lot of different ways to bring people to the mat that are MMA effective. And I like that you pointed out about his ground and pound. Like, it is a bit of old school ground and pound, because if he can take someone down straight into side control and just start mauling him, he obviously will. But on his way up, he would do the Tito or Fedor thing where I'm not even going to try to pass your guard until I've knocked you around a little bit. It'll get a lot easier to pass your guard when you are tired of me elbowing you. So here, I'm with you. I agree that Parsons is durable enough that he's going to be around in the third round. And if he can make Smith work early, there's a good chance he's the fresher man in the third round and makes things a little bit interesting. But give me Smith to have already socked away 2 rounds by that point. Smith by decision for me as well.
No. So I didn't tell you, my son was in this. So he wrestled all day Saturday and all day Sunday, but we were in Connecticut at Danbury for it was a 16 dual meet, and it was like invitation only. It was like the top 6 teams in New England, but it was K through 8 duels, where like it just goes by weight, it doesn't go by age. And my son, who's 4th grade, he's 9 years old, when he gets a 13-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah, I kid 8th grader, and I'm like, obviously he got my son got murdered, and I'm like, and the kid's good. Like, it's not even just the 8th grade, he's good because it's the top teams. And I'm like, does that do anything for like your 60? And some of the teams are cutting weight. Like, my son didn't cut weight. Like, kid cutting down to 69-pound weight class. I'm like, does that do anything for you to beat up a 4th grader? You're gonna be in high school next year. My son, you're gonna be in high school next year. My son's still gonna be in elementary school.
Like, people could conceivably get you like an electric shaver for your next birthday. You shouldn't be wrestling 9-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my son still believes in Santa Claus. Like, anyway. Seriously. You know what he was doing on the drive up? He was making flip books. Like, drawing pictures of like a stick figure shooting a basket over and over again. Doing
like
yeah. Dad, look at this. And the ball's like moving.
Lightweights are up next at UFC Vegas 101 as Thiago Moises tries to get back on track against Trey Ogden. Moises, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 18-8 overall. He is 7-6 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. He is coming in off a loss. He took on Kline last June at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov, where he dropped a unanimous decision. Prior to that, he fought last March, where he stopped Mitch Ramirez in the third round with leg kicks. So he'll be looking to get back in the win column here. He'll need to get past Ogden to do so. 35-year-old Kansas City native is 18-6 with 1 no contest overall. He's 3-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of a number of regional promotions, but his last stop was Fury Fighting Championship, where he appeared on one of the Dana White's Looking for a Fight episodes. He is on a 2-fight win streak comprising both of his cage appearances of last year. He took a unanimous decision over Kurt Holobaugh in March, then came back in July at UFC on ESPN, Lemos versus Jandiroba, and beat Loic Rajabov by unanimous decision as well. So looking for his third straight victory. Ogden is not favored to get it, however, as Moises is minus 200, Ogden plus 170. Keith will not be surprised at all that I'm going upset here.
Nope, I knew it.
I mean, Ogden's grown into one of my, favorite fighters over the past year or two, but it's not like he's my favorite fighter because he says funny stuff or he's cute. I like what makes his game run, and it just so happens.
Are you calling him ugly?
I'm not the best judge. Let's just put it that way. But what makes his game run is stuff that's going to give Thiago Moises fits. Moises got thrust into the top 10 and top 10 type matchups. It turns out in hindsight, way too soon. Like, he made kind of a splash on his way on his entry to the UFC because, he lost 2 of his first 3 fights, but they were both against top 10 talents, and he gave them both tough fights. Then he racked up 3 wins in a row over Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, and Alexander Hernandez. That got him into the top 10, and it got him into a fight with Islam Makhachev. And ever since then, we've had a better handle on who Thiago Moises really is. And he's still just 29. He won't be 30 for a couple of months, but he's kind of past that phase where I just assumed he was eventually, inevitably going to get better at the things that were hamstringing him before. His striking has gotten better. I overrated his striking early. And then I realized it wasn't that great. And it does seem to be coming back around now where he's becoming a serviceable striker, but he's still at his best as a submission artist. He can be positionally sound when he wants, but he's at his best when he is creating chaos, waiting for his opponent to make a mistake. And sure enough, his 3-fight win streak, his best one in the UFC, is against 3 of the most mistake-prone fighters in the entire organization. Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Alexander Hernandez. Like, Moises' best wins still come from either his opponent being just very outmatched or making a mistake and having an unguarded moment. Like, he absolutely throttled Christos Giagos. He caught Michael Johnson in that really, really nifty ankle lock after losing the first round pretty badly. But he's not durable. And unless you're a freak like Charles Oliveira, durability is not normally something that gets better after age 25 or so. and it just feels like a little bit of a front runner to me. And considering that Ogden is a grinder, a builder, somebody who has proven that he's able to take some punishment, hang on, and win late. And especially considering that Ogden is himself a very good grappler and is not wild or mistake prone. It's not just that I think he's going to beat Moises. I don't think he should necessarily even be the underdog. Give me Ogden to win a decision here, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Moises is frustrated, tired, beat up, and wild in the third round, and Ogden like gets some sort of like club and sub or club, fall him down in TKO. I think that's not the main chance, though. I'm going with Ogden by decision here, and in the cage, I don't even think it's going to look much like an upset. It's just going to look like the better fighter won.
Yeah, I mean, Moises has had moments of like flashes of like brilliance, but I'm surprised that he's this big of a favorite. I mean, he's not a great athlete. He's very like flat-footed. He doesn't have the highest output on the feet. He's kind of like a lower output striker. His boxing, I'd say, is okay. I mean, he keeps everything tight. He's got some decent hand speed. He has okay power. A lot of this happens because people worry about his grappling. So then, he lands some shots because of that. Nice kicking game. He has some hard kicks to the body. I mean, he's got good leg kicks. I mean, he stopped Mitch Ramirez with calf kicks. He mixes his striking and his takedown attempts together well. But I mean, he's a BJJ guy trying to wrestle. He's a pretty mediocre wrestler. I'd say his wrestling is probably grossly overrated. He does have good timing on his reactionary takedowns. Like if you pressure him too much, the problem is he gets to the hips and he just doesn't drive through. It's like exactly what I was talking about earlier, but he doesn't run his feet. He'll often shoot just to try to get close and then pull his opponent down to his guard. He is a very, very good BJJ practitioner. If he gets on top, he's got good control. He's got 8 submissions in his career. He will drop down. Like I was bringing up, he dropped down on ankle and caught Michael Johnson with it and almost caught Bobby Green with it. But Michael Johnson's the guy who gets caught in submissions like that, even though he's been around forever. And I am worried about his chin. I mean, he was hurt a lot in that Ludwig Kline fight multiple times. He's fought some good guys and got hurt a lot. Ogden's the opposite. He doesn't have like these flashy moments and like I just said that Moises has, flashes of greatness. Like that's not Ogden. He's just a show up every day kind of guy. Not a great athlete. He's actually he's probably a little better athlete than he gets credit for, but yeah, he moves well. He's got decent footwork, so I'll give him that. He's well-rounded though. I'd say he's a developing striker. He does need to increase his output a little bit, especially because of his kind of grimy style and the grappling. He needs to increase his output on the feet, but he has a good jab. He looks for his right hand, probably a little bit too much. He kind of whips that over a lot, but I like that he targets the body. He's got pretty good head movement. He slips and rips. He will sometimes back up straight to the cage, though, if he's being pressured, which I don't like. He's got a very good kicking game also. Doesn't check leg kicks, though. That's an issue. He will sneak in takedowns, and he's got some good entries. Good timing on his entries, especially when his opponent presses him. He will shoot without a setup sometimes, which is concerning. He's hard to take down. Like I can see Moises going for takedowns and struggling to get him down. Especially with his movement and his sprawl. If he's on top, he's a good grappler, as you mentioned. Good back takes. He doesn't rush submission attempts. He has 11 subs on his record. He has shown good submission defense in the past. He does need to improve his get-up game if he gets taken down. And cardio used to be an issue for him, but he has really fixed that. Where now it's almost a strength. I think this is a really fun scrap. I think it's very it's an intriguing, like thinking about it. Like I could see Moises, taking him down, looking for a submission. I think both guys are pretty inconsistent. Moises, I still see and have the higher upside. I think he still has more tools. But as you said, Ogden is a gamer. I think his wrestling and his kicks are going to take over for him late. I knew you would take an Ogden. I didn't know if he was going to be the underdog or not. I say he secures the last 2 rounds, secures a really close victory. We got our first consensus underdog pick. Give me Ogden by decision.
There you have it. The first consensus underdog pick of 2025 is Trey Ogden over Thiago Moises. And just to put one last note on something you alluded to there, once Ogden broke off from Glory and started his own gym, if you're going to run a place called Marathon MMA and cardio is still a problem for you, you're not going to be one of my favorite fighters. So good on him for fixing that. Middleweights are up next at UFC Vegas 101 as Marco Tulio faces off against Ihor Potieria. Tulio, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 12-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut, but he is a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought back in 2023, took a unanimous decision, was not immediately signed, so came back last year, had one last fight in LFA, appeared on the Contender Series again last August, and put away Matthew Duclos with a spinning back kick to the body. It was nasty. And that got him signed. And here he makes his debut against Potieria. 28-year-old Ukrainian is 20-7 overall. He is 2-5 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. And it's worth noting that while 2-5 is not great even by itself, it gets even worse once you realize that he started at light heavyweight, and since dropping to middleweight, he is 0-2. So things have gotten even worse. He is in presumably his last chance to turn things around, but you never know, especially at 185 and 205. But the odds makers have installed him as a substantial underdog, as Tulio is -500, Potieria +350. Keith, let me know what's good about Marco Tulio, and tell me if you think he's good enough to get past Potieria and good enough to make any serious noise at 185.
Yeah, what's good about him? He fights a really good team. I give him that. Obviously has a good background. He's got a good record, good experience. He's very aggressive on the feet. He is very wild, though. He tends to overthrow his strikes. He's a counter striker. He works the body well. Hard kicks, teep kicks, like spinning kicks. He finishes the last opponent with a spinning wheel kick on the Contender Series. He's got good power. He's got 8 TKOs, but he's very hittable. He's a stationary target standing right in front of his opponent. He will look for takedowns, but he's not very good at it. And he's a weak defensive wrestler and not much of a submission threat. Potieria, he's big for the weight class. Like that. He's southpaw. He fights in that bladed taekwondo style, which is tough for people to get used to. But he's a terrible athlete. His hands are slow. He attacks with combinations, but he throws a lot of looping punches. He does set up his shots well with feints, and he does a lot of hand fighting, which I do like. He has okay punching power, but due to his taekwondo style, he kind of keeps his hands too low for my liking, and I don't think he's that fast with his head movement. He keeps his chin high and been hit a lot. He has showed intelligence against I forget who it was. He kept. I don't know. I'm sorry. It was one opponent was attacking him, and it's a weird name. He kept closing the distance and clinching him, just to kind of break up the rhythm of the guy that was moving forward to attack him. Which
was it the Robert Brychek fight?
Brychek, yes.
Dude? Yeah.
Brychek couldn't get going because he kept clinching him and not letting him breaking up his rhythm, which I like. He wrestles a lot. The problem is he's pretty mediocre at it. If he gets the fight down, he does have 6 submissions, but he's gassed out in the past against Nicolle, Mariano. He gassed out against Hadafo. Bellato, he gassed out, but his cardio was much better against Brychek. I think the odds are way off. I don't think Tulio's that good. I think he could be a 2-1 favorite, but not a 5-1. And I'll say this about Potieria. Potieria will put himself in the best position to win. Now, he has a lot of limited tools, but I think this is going to be a much closer fight. I think there's going to be a back and forth. I just think Potieria is still too slow. I think Tulio might hurt him a couple of times on the feet. I have not picked many stoppages on this card. I'm going a decision again. Give me Tulio by decision.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of point at Potieria, who again is 2-5 in the UFC at this point, and in several of his losses, I mean, he'd gotten finished in 4 of those losses, and a couple of them, it was just quick and ugly. But he doesn't really have any losses to terrible fighters. And you pointed out the Brychek fight. His problem in so many of his other fights was that he just wasn't able to stop whatever his opponent wanted to do. Like, he has things that he does well, but like, he just has trouble taking over a fight, has trouble, to use the cliche, imposing his will. And the Brychek fight was one where he actually did something to stop what his opponent wanted to do, and it ended up winning him the fight. I'm with you in that this could end up looking a lot closer than the odds would lead us to believe, or Tulio could just lamp him in a minute and a half like Carlos Ulberg did, and we wouldn't really know more about either guy. Tulio's 2 appearances on the Contender Series they almost felt like a story of 2 different fighters to me, because he won the first time, but I understand why he didn't get signed, because he didn't look great. Like, he was fighting this 6'5" Tunisian kickboxer and really, really struggled to get him to the ground. So we just got kind of an ugly kickboxing match where neither guy looked comfortable. I think I scored all 3 rounds for him, but I wouldn't have signed him either. His second time around, just much more confident, really started uncorking some nasty strikes on the feet. You're right in that he does overthrow his things, but when his overthrown stuff lands, it's devastating. I mean, the finish sequence last season was one of the better finishes in the Contender Series last season. And Potieria is absolutely the kind of guy who will stand there and be a heavy bag for some highlight reel finish like that, if Tulio can pull it off. But yeah, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop with Tulio, because I haven't been that impressed by him either. I'm going to take Tulio here, and I'm going to say he does get a finish. In fact, I'm going to say it happens in the first round. But again, I don't know if that's going to teach us a whole lot about either guy. And if it gets out of the first round, considering the Potieria's cardio has strangely been better at 185 than 205, all bets are off. But I don't think it gets there. Give me Tulio to hit Potieria with something sloppy and sassy in the first round, and this thing's over. Next up at UFC Fight Night 249 is a men's flyweight contest between Jose Johnson and Felipe Bunes. Johnson, the 29-year-old Michigan native, is 16-9 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC as a 2-time veteran of the Contender Series. He fought on season 4 and lost, came back on season 6, won, and that got him signed. Since then, again, he's 1-2. Worth noting that he is 0-1 at flyweight. He had his first 2 fights in the UFC at bantamweight. He was probably the tallest bantamweight in the UFC, but then he decided to make it really ridiculous and dropped to flyweight, where he fought Asu Almabayev last June and dropped a unanimous decision. He's going to keep trucking at flyweight, and he's going to try to get back on track against Bunes. 35-year-old Brazilian is 13-7 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing LFA men's flyweight champ. He made his debut almost exactly a year ago at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2 last January, where Josh Van knocked him out late in the second round. Bunes has been on the shelf ever since. He steps back into the cage here as a moderate underdog. Johnson is minus 180, Bunes plus 150. Jose Johnson was a walking matchup problem at bantamweight. I mean, the guy was a 6-foot tall bantamweight, and just considering how wild it is that Charles Johnson is like a 5'9" or 5'10" flyweight. Johnson is substantially taller. And when he's not being drawn into brawls by more aggressive opponents, he uses range well, either at bantamweight or at flyweight. He has that kind of skinny man power that just comes from having long limbs and decent mechanics. He is still a liability defensively, like doesn't have great head movement. He's definitely prone to being out wrestled and then out grappled on the ground. I mean, I saw Mana Martinez clock him in Fury Fighting Championship, and it was just the classic overhead nailing a tall guy trying to lean straight back. Then Damon Blackshear, of course, got one of the submissions of the year in 2023 just by taking him down and being all over him and getting that twister. If Bunes wins this, I think it looks more like the Asu Amabayev fight, where Johnson just couldn't keep Amabayev off him on the feet, just couldn't keep him from getting inside, and Amabayev was able to win exchanges in the clinch, get Johnson on the ground. That's the kind of thing that Bunes will do. It's the kind of thing he wants to do. But I don't think he gets it done. I think Johnson wins this one. Give me Johnson to try to just pull off like an all the way out, all the way in type performance on the feet, as you like to put it, and able to stay upright enough that he wins 2 rounds out of 3. Frustrating night for Felipe Bunes. Give me Jose Johnson to pick up the win here by decision.
Yeah, this is I mean, obviously this is gonna be a fun fight. Being a flyweight fight is always one of my favorite fights. I mean, Johnson, you talked about it. Like he wouldn't be small if he was a featherweight. I mean, the guy's a massive dude, massive flyweight, long and lengthy, pretty well rounded, pretty good on his feet. He's a volume striker, fairly explosive, fast hands, accurate. I love his right hand. It's super sharp. He's got some big power, likes elbows inside, which I love. Big kicking game, hard calf kicks, uses his size well when he closes distance in the clinch, likes trip takedowns. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but he's pretty good at scrambling back to his feet. He will land elbows if you take him down off the back. He'll start throwing elbows, kind of similar to Shara Bullet, where he's gonna make, if you take him down, he's gonna make you pay with him. He's got 3 subs on his record. He's got some subs off of his back, which is it's dangerous to take him down. Bunes, or Bunes, how you say it, he's not a good athlete, and that's a problem in this division. Well, no, I shouldn't say he's an okay athlete, but to be upper echelon at flyweight, you have to be a great athlete. He's got fairly quick hands. He's accurate. He's got some nice step on his shots. Nice straight shots down the pipe. I like his jab. He's got a great left hook. He's shown some power. Throws some spinning attacks and wheel kicks, but he's not that good at that stuff because he's not the greatest athlete. He's a decent wrestler. More of a BJJ practitioner. He's got 8 subs on his record. But he gassed out early against Joshua Van, despite even winning the first round. Not that beating Van in the first round is an accomplishment, because he always loses the first round. I think it's a solid fight. I think both guys are fun, entertaining. I think Bunes might have a slight grappling advantage, but Johnson I think is faster. I think his striking from the outside could be an issue. I think his overall size could be an issue. Give me Johnson to pick apart Nunes with his boxing and kicks from range. I like you said that if Bunes closes this time, I could see Johnson initiating clinch and using his size in there, maybe getting a takedown of his own. Give me Johnson by decision.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Vegas 101 begins with a welterweight matchup between Punahele Soriano and Uros Medic. Soriano, the 32-year-old Hawaiian by way of Vegas, is 10-4 overall. He is an even 4-4 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He had a decent run going and then ran into a tough stretch there where he lost 4 out of 5 fights. That inspired him to drop from middleweight to welterweight, where he made a successful debut last June, taking a unanimous decision over Miguel Baeza. He's staying at 170 pounds, and he's going to look for his second straight win in his new division against an opponent who is coming to this division from the opposite direction in the form of former lightweight Medic. The 31-year-old Alaskan, now training out of Southern California, is 10-2 overall. He is 4-2 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of the Contender Series. He did win his last time out. It was last April, where he knocked out Tim Means in the second round. That allowed him to bounce back from a submission loss to Miktabek Orolbai a little over a year ago. So Medic looking for his second straight win at 170 pounds as well. He is favored to get it. He is minus 200, Soriano plus 170. So Soriano's welterweight debut in the UFC last summer. The good news is he made 170 just fine, which I remember on the preview expressing serious doubt because, I mean, he's not the biggest 185 pounder, obviously, but he was very Hawaiian looking. He was just a big dude with big muscle on his frame, but he made 170 no problem. He won his fight easily. That's the good news. The bad news is that his opponent was Miguel Baeza, who was picking up his 4th straight loss that night and looked to be a completely spent fighter. So all we really learned about Puna Soriano in 2024 is that he can weigh 171 pounds on Friday morning. Here, I mean, I will freely admit that I misjudged Medic on his way into the UFC. I mean, one of my worst calls in the history of our show was picking him to lose his UFC debut to Alon Cruz. We have a better handle on who he is now as a fighter, and almost the inverse of Soriano. He's somebody that even when he was winning fights at 155, my thought was, this guy looks like he could be a welterweight and do just fine. He decided to try his luck at it. And obviously Tim Means in 2024 is the tread's pretty thin on the tires, but Medic destroyed him in a way that few people do to Tim Means even now. Medic moving up also means some other good things. Like, he is a kickboxer by preference, and while he was a big lightweight, he gave up a little speed to a lot of his opponents, win or lose. I think he's going to be quicker than a lot of his opponents, just faster hands, faster feet than more of his opponents at welterweight. He showed a sneaky, effective offensive wrestling. I don't know if that'll get better. I don't know if being at 170 pounds will shore up his defensive wrestling and defensive grappling issues. We didn't learn anything about that in the Means fight because it was over so quickly. I doubt we'll learn anything about it here because, I mean, Soriano really only goes to the ground when somebody is almost knocked out, either him or the other guy. So for me, it's just who's gonna win the kickboxing match. And I lean Medic here just because I'm still not sure that Soriano isn't still the guy that, again, lost 4 out of 5 against decent but not great competition at 185. But yeah, give me Medic to win this fight. And I think what we're going to see a lot of is Medic having better footwork than Soriano, tagging him up with jabs and 1-2s, hitting him with some leg kicks, kind of getting out of the way and playing the matador when Soriano surges forward and tries, 1, to force phone booth boxing, 2, to force the clinch, or if he gets really desperate later in the fight, is just trying takedowns from outside. But give me Medic to dictate the range, dictate the rhythm, and just kind of beat Soriano up for 3 rounds. Medic by decision here.
Yeah, so I mean, when we break down the card, this is definitely like your mid card guys. This is like the highest level for these guys. So usually those are the guys I'm not that excited about. Like, they are what they are, but like, this fight will be fun. As I mentioned earlier, like this is not one you're going to want to miss. It should be entertaining. Both guys can throw hard. Soriano, I mean, I'll say this. I agree with what you said. Like, going against Miguel Baeza doesn't really tell you much about a guy making his debut in a different weight class, but he did look way better at welterweight. I think that's probably his proper weight class, as he wasn't the biggest middleweight. He's southpaw. He's a pocket box. Well, I know he's a wide guy, but he's not tall. He's not like that's what I mean. He's a pocket boxer. He's got fairly fast hands. He does need to improve his output. He's accurate. He's got some good power. I go back to like his straight left against Dusko Todorovic. I mean, he could not miss. I think that said more about Todorovic though than him. He has showed that he can knock guys out with that overhand left. He caught Lungbula with it. He can be very predictive though. Stolfus was able to counter it because he kept throwing the same overhand left. He can get wild and he loads up a lot. I like that he does throw kicks in his combinations though. He's one of these guys. He's willing to eat a shot to try to land some of his own, and that's because he really trusts his own chin and trusts his power. You mentioned that he doesn't wrestle much. He's an underrated wrestler, but he does let it go. He's got solid entries. I think he needs to wrestle more. He's good at getting to the second level and driving through the hips. He showed in the past how strong he is. If he can grab a leg, he can launch guys. He also can get some foot sweeps. But he's a weak defensive wrestler. He's got some submission defense issues. I mean, Dustin Sulfitz, though I think Sulfit's a little underrated guy. But if Soriano ends up on top, he's got hard ground and pound. Manish, southpaw, you mentioned it. Like he moved up in weight, and he's still huge for the weight class. Long, lengthy guy, high output kickboxer. He is constantly on the gas, which leads him to be reckless sometimes. I said it before. Like I love the Alan Cruz fight where like he came out like a madman, and I've said he beat Cruz before Cruz even knew the fight started. He's a really good solid striker from distance. He kept Omar Morales at the end of his punches. He kept Matthew Semmelberger at the end of his punches. He's accurate because of his aggressive style. It bites him in the ass. I mean, that's got him smashed against Jalen Turner, but like Jalen Turner's a really, really good fighter. He'll throw out some spinning attacks. He's so wild that it actually kind of works for him. He has like a little bit like a Yuri Prohaska style to him, where good.
No, I'm just laughing like that. What a great comparison.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of guys I don't like it, but then some people it just works for, and I feel like he's like a JV version of or a poor man's version of Yuri Prohaska. And everything before someone says, "Oh, you know how many knockouts Yuri Prohaska?" I'm saying in everything, not like if you're getting like the Timu version of Yuri Prohaska. He loves push kicks, which forces the opponent on his back foot, which I really like. He's got good power. I mean, he knocked out Tim Means. We saw that and he is like I was talking about how crazy he can get. To his credit, one of his best performances was probably the Omar Morales, where he was a lot more controlled and patient. His kicks are dangerous. I mean, it's a while ago, but he folded Mikey Rolls with a body kick. Similar to Tim Means, who his former opponent, he likes to follow his long strikes into the pocket, which could be trouble against someone like Soriano. But he'll get inside and start throwing some mean, nasty uppercuts. That's what he caught Means with. He doesn't wrestle much, and his defense wrestling is really bad. He struggles to get off the bottom. I've said this before. I don't think he knows what an underhook is used for. He can use an underhook to get back to his feet. He does have good submissions off his back, though, because he's got those long legs. He attacks with knee bars and heel hooks. I think this is a closer fight than you were projecting. You seem like you're very high on Medic in this fight. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit because Soriano did look better at welterweight. Medic is a solid striker. I see avenues of victory for both guys. I think Soriano has the edge in the grappling, but Medic is the better striker. If I knew Soriano would wrestle, I would feel a lot more confident picking him if he can get takedowns, land some hard ground and pound. I see that being the biggest advantage either fighter has over the other. I really want to take Soriano. I want to take him to take down Medic, to control him, to land that mean ground and pound. I think Soriano's super tough that if that fight happens, he'd still make it to the distance. But I'm more going gut feeling in this fight because I keep picturing Medish coming out super aggressive, landing hard shots. Soriano fighting against his own like best judgment. His best judgment would be to like throw some big overhand punches to get Medish to raise his hands and then shoot takedowns underneath. But I expect him to stand on the outside and throw with him. And I think Medish is going to catch him. I say Medish knocks him out in the second round.
Featherweights are up next as Christian Rodriguez welcomes Austin Bashi to the UFC. Rodriguez, the 27-year-old Wisconsinite, is 11-2 overall. Won on the Contender Series, wasn't signed immediately, but was signed within the next 6 months or so. 5-2 since then. He did lose, 4-2 since then. He did lose his last time out. He got guillotined by Julian Erosa in the first round at UFC on ESPN, Namajunas versus Cortez last summer. Prior to that, he had been on a 4-fight win streak, including knocking off a trio of more highly regarded prospects in a row in the form of Raul Rosas Jr., Cameron Simon, and Isaac Dolgarian. Rodriguez loses to Erosa, and he gets maybe the toughest prospect test of them all as a reward in the form of Bashi. Bashi, 23-year-old Detroit native, is a perfect 13-0 as a professional. He will be making his UFC debut. He won on the Contender Series last September, choking out Dorian Ramos in the second round. Bashi enters this fight as a substantial favorite. He is minus 270, Rodriguez plus 220. I do like Austin Bashi a lot as a prospect. I mean, he's 23 years old. You got to love that. And won't even be 24 until the end of this year, basically. He is not massive, but just kind of the perfect sized featherweight, fantastic athlete. He was a very good high school wrestler who, rather than, go wrestle at like a D2 college or, go polish up at a junior college and try to transfer to a Division I college, just went straight into BJJ. And within 3 or 4 years, he was medaling at the brown belt level at IBJJF tournaments. So
I think he won the world championships.
Yeah, I think he won it I think he won the gold medal at again at the brown belt level. But yeah, he's taken to grappling like a fish to water. He at his best puts on a furious pace. His athleticism, his aggression, people's terror of his ground game. I think at this point in his development, it is covering up some mistakes and limitations in his striking that eventually someone's going to be able to expose. And who knows, maybe that somebody is Christian Rodriguez. Like I said, he won 3 fights in a row over the last 2 years or so over prospects that at some point had been much, much more highly regarded than himself. At his best, Bashi kind of reminds me of the best Diego Sanchez, where good wrestler, outstanding submission grappler, furious pace, great cardio, and all of that makes his striking good enough for all but the best opponents.
That's a really good comparison. Yeah. Like a 2025 version of him. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Once he ran into BJ Penn, who wasn't scared of his wrestling and grappling, the limitations in his striking were exposed badly. I hope Bashi comes out holding a cross, screaming, "Yes!"
Dude, here's the thing: all we would take for Upset City to start here is Rodriguez to fight off one takedown and kick his lead leg a couple times. Thus far, nobody has even really put up that much resistance for Austin Bashi. Rodriguez is a huge step up from the people that. Yeah. Because here's the thing: Christian Rodriguez got Julian Erosa. He got guillotined in the first round. But if Rodriguez and Erosa fight 10 times, my gut feeling is that they go about 5-5. And it ends in the first round 2/3 of the time. If he happens to get Erosa on the coin flip night that he's the one that finishes him, he's fighting the top 10 opponent this weekend, not Austin Bashi. Like Rodriguez is very, very good. If Bashi's the real deal, I mean, I think he does win this fight. Bashi's thus far looks like a surefire future contender. It's just a matter of, whether he's going to take an L at some point along the way, running into somebody just too soon. Rodriguez could be that guy. And watch me make this pick, and then Rodriguez just reminds us all what time it is. And he will have every right to do so. Like, if he beats Bashi, I hope he just goes, I beat Raul Rosas Jr., and you didn't listen. I helped kick Cameron Simon out of the UFC. I beat Isaac Dolgarian. None of you believe in me. I will owe this man an apology if he pulls out the upset on Saturday, but give me Austin Bashi to pass this substantial step up in competition. And I think Rodriguez is going to come out and do the right things. Like, I could see this being a tough first round for Bashi. Maybe Rodriguez even wins the first round, but Bashi's just so aggressive, so relentless and persistent when he decides he wants the takedown. And he's one of those guys that he's equally comfortable if he can get a clean takedown and go to work from guard, or if he just creates chaos and gets you into a scramble and just trusts his better instincts and better grappling to find something. Give me Bashi here, and I'm going to say he gets a third round submission, but has to undergo a little adversity along the way, and in a way that will elevate Bashi's stock more than if he just destroyed Rodriguez in 90 seconds. Give me Bashi by third round submission.
Yeah, this is a really fun fight. You talked about Bashi. That's the big step up in competition. That wasn't a knock on the guys he fought. He fought really good regional fighters, like guys with good records. And tough guy on the Contender Series. But it's just Rodriguez is a really tough out for anybody in the UFC. I mean, he's a quality UFC opponent. He's a good athlete. He's a good boxer. He's got really good volume. He's a pressure counter striker. He wants to go moving forward. But that's what kind of cost him against Julian Rosa. Rosa kind of pressing him back. He also struggled a little bit with the range of Erosa, but Erosa is much better than he gets credit for. Rodriguez, he can get in range. He can slip and rip. He fights behind a high guard defense. He's got plus power. I mean, he was cracking his overhand right, hurt Stephen Pierce several times in that fight. He's got good step-in elbows. He tacks a lot of his attacks to the body. He's a solid offensive wrestler, not the best defensive wrestler. But to his credit, like go back to like the Isaac Dolgarian fight, he's popping right back up when he gets taken down. He has 4 subs on his record. He's a little bit of a specialist. He loves guillotines. He also loves some head attacks. Goes good at Anaconda. He subbed Joshua Williams with Anaconda. He's not perfect grappler. He was subbed by Julian Rosa. Cardio has been an issue in the past, but his cardio looked much better against Cameron Simon, which is another tough fight. Bashi, I mean, only 23 years old. I love that. He's a very good athlete, moves well, good footwork, fast hands, attacks with combinations, nice power. And the great thing about his power is he hasn't really reached his power years yet. So that's something we could suddenly see really like blossom in his next couple fights. And he generates so much power because he really steps into his shots. He's got a quick high kick. He mixes strikes and takedowns together well. He's a very solid wrestler, especially for a guy that doesn't have high credentials. He's got good entries. He chain wrestles, attacks well, good hip control. You talked about his, grappling accolades, competing in really high level tournaments. Good control, good back takes. He's got 5 subs on his record. I like his ground and pound. This is a really fun matchup. I mean, Rodriguez is really well-rounded. He's a tough out for anybody. I'm high on Bashi, though. I mean, he's such a good prospect. And he's at the age where he can continue to make huge improvements. Even though Dolgarian is a better wrestler than Bashi, he doesn't have the grappling like chops that Bashi has, the submission attempts, the control. That's something I think that Bashi will be able to do against Rodriguez when he takes him down. They could be able to control a little bit. So give me Bashi by decision.
The UFC Fight Night 249 main card powers on with a middleweight matchup between Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov. Curtis, the 37-year-old Ohio native, is 31-11 with one no contest overall. He's 5-3 with one no contest since joining the UFC as a veteran of literally every other promotion on the planet. He is coming in off of a loss. He fought most recently last April in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 240, where he dropped a split decision to Brendan Allen in a rematch of their first meeting back in 2021. So he's looking to get back in the win column here, and he will need to get past Kopylov to do so. 32-year-old Russian is 13-3 overall. He is 5-3 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Fight Night's global middleweight champ. He is coming in off a win. He won a split decision over Cesar Almeida, whom we'll be talking about in a few minutes, at UFC 302 last June. So he's looking to add to that momentum, and he is favored to do so. Kopylov is minus 270, Curtis plus 220. Keith, I'll flip this to you. I feel as though, this is a real fun middleweight fight between a couple of kind of guys hanging out on the fringes of the top 15, which means that this one means a whole hell of a lot. Because, I mean, obviously, first card of the year, both of these guys' year is going to be, the tone is set here. But the winner of this fight has a good angle on being in the top 10 by the end of this year. The guy who loses is going to be worried about his job each time out for the rest of this year. Who you got, and how do you think the fight plays out?
This is a really fun fight. I'm surprised Curtis is this big of an underdog. Like, I don't see many guys in the division. Like, I wouldn't put Curtis, if he's the same Curtis. I mean, he's coming back from a major injury. I think he tore his hamstring I don't see Curtis being like this big an underdog against Dricus du Plessis. Like, he's good. And even more surprising to me is how low this is on the card. I thought it should at least be the co-main event. You could probably even make an argument that it should be the main event. I'm looking forward to this fight. This is one of the fights I'm most interested in. I think Kopylov deserves the step up in competition too. So. I'll start with Curtis. Obviously, if he's the same fighter that we last saw when he was last fought in Brandon Allen in a fight that a lot of people thought he was going to win if it wasn't for him, blowing his. I think it was his hamstring right in the closing seconds of the fight. Yeah. And that would have been a really good win for him. He's a southpaw. He's a boxer. He's a counter striker. My one issue I've had against him is that he cruises at times and not throws enough. I mean, he did this against Kelvin Gastelum. He did against Joaquin Buckley. But he has upped his output recently. He can make fights close. I think of the Marc-Andre Barrios. That fight was much closer than it should have been if he just let his hands go. That was a fight that was a split decision. And some of that is because he doesn't let his hand hold. Also, it's like his optics. He's a guy that he rolls with punches, with very boxing style. It just makes you look like you're losing. When he closes his distance and he gets in the pocket and he throws, he's got some tight, clean boxing. He loves hooks. He loves uppercuts. He's good at slipping his opponent's shots and countering with an uppercut, which is rare. He works the body so well. I mean, he butchered Rodolfo Vieira's body. He has really good power. He's got a bunch of KOs in his career. And done against some good fighters too. One negative is if you move a lot against him, he struggles to cut off the cage. We saw that against Jack Hermanson. If he closes the distance, he's a good clinch striker. It was his clinch striking against Marc-Andre Barrios that gave him the win. He can wrestle, but he doesn't look for takedowns nearly enough. He almost never wrestles. When he wrestles, it's because someone else initiated it. But he's got a strong top game. I mean, he showed really good takedown defense against Rodolfo Vieira. But I was surprised that he was taken down as easily as he was against Brandon Allen. He's got a great chin. He almost never gets hurt. He also has a cardio to go hard. In all 15 minutes, he really doesn't waste much energy. He's shown that he can go 25, so going 15 shouldn't be a big issue. Again, if he's the same fighter as before an injury. Kovalev is big for the weight class. He's a great athlete, southpaw, good kickboxer, likes to work from range, though he hated the pressure from Anthony Hernandez. But, I mean, we both know how that fight looks right now. I mean, Anthony Hernandez is the real deal. He's a very accurate fighter. He's a builder that gets stronger as the fight moves on. Nice jab, throws straight shots down the pipe. He showed pop against Cesar Almeida, dropped him and rocked him a few times against a decorated kickboxer. Good variety in his striking, big kicking game, crushing kicks to the body. He stopped Soriano with a body kick, stopped Josh Friend with a body kick. Beautiful high kick KO of Claudio Ribeiro. He will wrestle. He wrestles Cesar Almeida a lot, showing his intelligence. Though sometimes he won't set up his entries. He also, if he gets a takedown, he'll stall on top. No problem, like boring the crowd out with that. Not much of a submission artist. Though he is the hard to get to take him down. He's got good takedown defense. He slowed in his fight against Almeida, which was surprising, but I think that has a lot to do with Almeida's style. Like, he's going to work your body, and he kind of plays the long game. I think this fight is great. I was going to say that, usually my flyweight is always my favorite fight, but I think this is my favorite fight on the card. I think it's going to be very competitive. I think both guys will have their moments. If Cruz is the same fighter before the big injury, it could be really fun. I mean, I see it as a boxer versus a kickboxer who gets into their range. I think Kovalev keeps his distance with his kicks from the outside. I think he might sneak in a takedown when Curtis gets inside. I'm not too confident how this fight goes, but one thing I am confident that if Kovalev wins a decision, Curtis will be complaining about the decision. But he gives away rounds too much for me. He puts himself in tough situations to win sometimes. Give me Kovalev to win by decision.
Yeah, I like the call there. One good piece of news is that, and this really encapsulates his entire UFC run, is that Chris Curtis has realized that he's a better middleweight than he is a welterweight. Like, kind of like Robert Whittaker, despite the fact that, he was visibly smaller than most of his opponents, his game runs better at 185 pounds. These guys, man, like, you think about it, Kopolov's only loss in the last, 18 to 24 months is against Anthony Hernandez. Curtis has a loss to Brendan Allen, and he had that no contest against Nasruddin Imavov, which, you know what? Anything could happen, but they were halfway through the fight, and Imavov appeared to be on his way to winning. But
and a loss that doesn't look too bad right now.
Oh, Imavov went on to win his next 4 fights. Like, yeah. But like the three of them, Hernandez, Imavov, and Allen, it's not out of the realm of possibility that all 3 of those guys fight for UFC belts this year. Like, these are 2 high-level fighters in the division. This fight definitely means something, and it should be really fun on top of that. I underestimated Kopylov. Like, I knew the kind of fighter he was. Like, you watch his fights in Fight Nights Global, he did the same things he does now. But after his first couple fights, the Roberson fight, which was frankly embarrassing, then his loss to Albert Duraev, I thought, okay, here's another, hot, at the time, undefeated prospect out of Russia that's the wheels are all just going to fall off in North America, apparently. That's not been the case. Like, he's, again, just all the same things that he's always wanted to do. He's just gotten it to work. And the only time he's really come up short is against Anthony Hernandez, who, again, he's probably a top 5 fighter right now. Kopolov's takedown defense is better than I thought it was. His power is better than I thought it was. It's carried over to the point that he hurts his opponents when he hits them. I did like that he turned to offensive wrestling against Cesar Almeida. I'd feel more hope in Curtis having upset potential, if not for that injury, if not for the fact that he's 37 now, just because his durability and cardio are going to be a question mark until I see him on Saturday, past about minute 7 of the fight. I think Kopylov wins a real fun fight here. And you pointed out that Curtis sometimes has trouble putting a stamp on rounds, just doesn't throw enough, where you and I might think, yeah, he won that round, but he just leaves enough doubt that, there's a reason that he has, 2 split decisions in 8 UFC fights already. I could see Kopylov getting another splitter from him. I have Kopylov by decision here as well. My biggest question will just really be, how does Kopylov look in the 3rd round? And does Curtis really seem to be fully back to himself after the Allen fight and the long recovery? But I'm going with Kopylov here as well. Third from the top at UFC Vegas 101 is another middleweight matchup. This one between Abdulrazak Alhassan and Cesar Almeida. Alhassan, the 39-year-old Ghanaian by way now of Colorado, is 12-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 6-6 with 1 no contest in the UFC. That no contest came in his last outing, which was his only outing of 2024, as he faced Cody Brundage at UFC on ESPN Namajunas versus Cortez last July. The fight was over in 37 seconds as Alhassan blasted Brundage's brains out with a bunch of elbows, some of which were to the back of the head, some of which were 12-6 elbows, which would no longer be a problem in the unified rules now. But nonetheless, it was a no contest within seconds. Everybody involved was disappointed. He's looking to get back into the win column here, and he will need to do it against Almeida. 36-year-old Brazilian is 6-1 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out, took a unanimous decision over Ihor Potieria at UFC 307 last October. That allowed him to bounce back from his split decision loss to Kopylov last June at UFC 302. He will look to make it 2 in a row, hold out some hope for an eventual meeting with his one-time kickboxing rival, Alex Pereira. He is favored to get it done. Almeida is minus 300, Alhassan plus 250. Here's the thing is, I understand why Abdulrazak Alhassan is the big underdog he is, because pretty much everybody in the arena, everybody watching at home, everybody watching at the Hooters or the Buffalo Wild Wings knows what Abdulrazak Alhassan is going to do. He's going to run right out, start throwing haymakers and a couple of huge kicks, and basically just try to start a brawl with a much, much more technically skilled kickboxer, and he's probably going to get lamped in the first round.
Yep, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, that's based on now 13 fights worth of evidence. That's what I think is probably going to happen. But when I ask myself, okay, if we get the upset here, what does it look like? It's pretty easy to see that as well, because while Cesar Almeida is a decorated kickboxer and he is definitely a plus striker by MMA standards, he is neither the kill shot artist Alex Pereira is, nor is he some sort of Matrix-like defensive wizard like Israel Adesanya. Almeida's gotten hit cleanly by less skilled and credentialed fighters than himself. And whatever else Alhassan may have going on, he does hit stupidly hard. He has a couple of just absolutely brutal one-shot knockouts with his hands as well as with his feet. I can see what the upset looks like. And he's also shown that, we make fun of the Judo Thunder nickname all the time, but he's shown that he is capable of wrestling and at least trying to bring people to the ground when it's in his best interest occasionally. So I see where the upset would come from and what it would look like if we get it. But considering that Almeida knows that he's really on his last chance to make something fun out of his UFC run, considering that Alhassan himself is now 39 years old, that's not good in any weight class. Just the chances of Almeida leaving himself open and just making a huge mistake that Alhassan would need in order to win this fight seem really slim. Alhassan has generally been pretty durable to strikes. I mean, Chaos Williams lamped him with one shot, but aside from that, he's taken hard shots from people and been fine. I mean, he fought 3 rounds with Joaquin Buckley, and they were both standing at the end of it. I'm going to say Almeida wins by decision, but I think it's going to be ugly. I think Almeida is going to punish him and maybe leave me one of those fights where we were kind of wishing it would be stopped as Alhassan's like lumped up, beat up, and Almeida's just not going to extend himself to try to get the finish on the feet because he's wary of the one big haymaker that he knows represents pretty much his only plausible chance of losing this fight. So give me Almeida in a lopsided decision here.
Yeah, I think your breakdown was really good on the avenue of victory for Alhassan. My notes on Alhassan is going to be the same notes before the Burgess fight. I mean, the 30 seconds really doesn't say much. So instead of me like getting big into tape study, you know, he's 38 years old, or is he 38,
39 now?
Yeah, sorry, 39
yeah.
years old. Yeah, so there you go. I didn't update my notes. He's 39, which is obviously troublesome, and especially for a guy that relies on being explosive, and that's such a huge part of his game. I think his hand speed is declining. So if that's true, everything will fall apart. I mean, he's still a good athlete. He's still quick hands, and he still has huge fight ending power. He's good at hand fighting. He's got a big kicking game. He adds kicks into his combo. Though he doesn't check leg kicks, he's always had some defensive issues. He stands directly in front of his opponent as a stationary target. He pillars to avoid strikes. I think you're right. I think he has been hurt a lot. Like you talked about, Buckley not knocking him out and stuff like that. Middleweight Buckley is different than welterweight Buckley, but Buckley's best knockout was a middleweight, but he's been hurt a lot in fights. So he might not have this like incredible get knocked out moments. Being that he's older and he's a little slower down, I think that could come. He doesn't wrestle much. But he did get 3 takedowns in the Buckley fight. When he wrestles, he's not too bad at it. And I think he should wrestle more because it gives his hands more openings. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though. I mean, Jacob Malkoun took him down over and over again. Joe Pyfer took him down easily. I think both those guys, underrated fighters, fighters an underrated grappler. I don't think he gets enough credit for his grappling. He is a bad submission grappler. He was submitted easily by Joe Pyfer, and he's always had cardio issues. The 12-6 elbow thing, obviously is how he defended takedowns against Brennich. That's good that's illegal for him now. Almeida, he's a really good kickboxer. He's accurate. He's super accurate. The dude's so accurate. He was able to poke Ihor Potieria in the eye 4 times. He throws straight shots down the pipe. I mean, his straight right is deadly. He's got really big power. His power generates because he really steps into his shot. He keeps his base underneath him, so his legs are underneath him when he's landing shots. Though he will load up a little bit. He works the body as good as anybody I've seen in the UFC. His body work is as slow as opponents down, and he builds and pours on the volume as the fight goes on, as his opponent slows down. Due to his traditional kickboxing style, he doesn't move much, and he stands directly in front of his opponent and pulls his head straight back. I mean, he was dropped and rocked by Roman Kopylov in their fight. He's got some really hard calf kicks, though sometimes he won't send him up. He doesn't offer offensive wrestle at all. He's a bad defensive wrestler. He likes to defend takedowns with the downward elbows, which is a good thing for him. And his get-up game has been inconsistent. There's times he pops right to his feet. There's times he really struggles. I think he's improving his overall grappling, though. I mean, he almost had a guillotine in his last fight. He got to mount in that fight. And on top, he has crushing ground and pound. I like what you said. I think Al Hassan has 2 shots, either turn this into a wrestling match, but I think if he does, that'll gas him out a little bit, especially if Almeida's working back to his feet, where Al Hassan has to go from multiple takedowns, or as you said, land a big shot, land it early. I don't see either happen. I think Almeida beats up his legs. I think he beats up his body. I think it really slows Al Hassan down. I think Al Hassan eats a lot of shots when he slows. I think Almeida, puts the volume up even more, and I think he puts him out. I keep thinking about a body shot, but it also could be that straight right. But give me Almeida by second round TKO.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 249, a welterweight clash between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Carlston Harris. Ponzinibbio, the 38-year-old Argentine, is 29-8 overall. He's 11-7 in the UFC, and he's lost. He's on a bit of a bad run. He's lost 5 of his last 7, and that's his 7 fights since returning from a nearly 3-year-long layoff due to injury and illness. Frankly, he's not been the same top 10 contender he was, but he's still been matched like one, getting top 10 or top 15 opponents every single time out. He's on a 2-fight losing streak right now, including his sole outing of last year, which was in July, where he dropped a split decision to Muslim Salikov. So he's looking to bounce back from that. He is enjoying prime card placement once more as he's in the co-main event here, but he will be facing Harris. Harris, 37-year-old from Guyana, is 19-6 overall. He's 4-2 in the UFC. He lost in his last appearance. It was last May, got knocked out in the first round by Chaos Williams. Prior to that, he had been on a 2-fight win streak dating back almost all the way to the beginning of 2023. So he's looking to get back in the win column. Ponzinibbio, desperate to get back in the win column. Of all the fights on the card, this one is the only dead pick'em, as both men are out there minus 110, minus 115, depending on which book you choose. It's been rough to watch Ponzinibbio since he's been back. I mean, for those who may not remember or may remember and maybe just not fully appreciate, in November of 2018, so just a little over 60 years ago, he knocked out Neil Magny in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 140. Knocked him out in the 4th round, which is normally the time of a fight where Neil Magny is starting to roll downhill and do Neil Magny stuff to people. And that wrapped up a run for him where he won 7 out of 8 fights, including wins over Magny, Mike Perry, which was a good win in 2017, Sean Strickland, who was a good fight, even if that was, at 170, which turned out not to be Strickland's best weight class. He knocked out Court McGee, and you think, oh, Court McGee, he's the only person to stop Court McGee on strikes in McGee's first 20 fights in the UFC. He was a guy that going into 2019, it's like, he's ready for top 5 opponents. We're going to see if this guy makes it to a title shot in 2019. And instead he disappeared for 2.5 years with injuries, illness, like career threatening illness. And since he's come back, he's not been the same, but again, he's been matched the same. Like, he has a win over Miguel Baeza that we've already talked about. Just the guy fell apart after a couple of promising fights in the UFC. He stopped Alex Morono in the 3rd round of a fight that he was on his way to losing. And honestly, if not for the fact that it looked so ghastly, like he hit a nerve in Morono's face, it looked like Morono had a stroke. Like, it definitely hurt. But if not for the fact that it looked so ghastly, if that goes to the end of the 3rd round, even if Morono loses the 3rd round, he wins the fight. And aside from that, it's losses to top 10 guys: Li Jingliang, Jeff Neal, Michel Pereira, Kevin Holland, Muslim Salikov. Like, Ponzinibbio just does not get a break. And this is as much of a break as the UFC is willing to give him right now. And it's still a rough matchup. Harris's problem, well, His problem, aside from the fact that he was already like 33 or 34 when he got to the UFC, has been incredible inconsistency. Yeah, like his only losses in the UFC are to Shavkat Rakhmonov, who may be champ by this summer, and to Chaos Williams. That, yeah, Williams is inconsistent himself, but if you want to tell me that Chaos Williams is the hardest hitting, like the hardest puncher in the history of the welterweight division, I might not agree, but I wouldn't laugh. Like, knocking people out with one giant punch is what Chaos Williams does. Like, aside from that, he's looked good to great against other opponents. Like, his win over Jeremiah Wells has looked real good. It's like it snapped like a 6-fight win streak for Wells. Harris at his best is a long, rangy kickboxer with tons of power in all of his limbs. Like, he has hard punches, hard kicks, hard knees. When he really gets going, he'll throw kicks to all levels. Like, he knows that he's a tall, lanky guy for the division, willing to uncork some head kicks. He doesn't take fights to the ground by preference, but he seems perfectly comfortable when he gets there. He has 3 anaconda choke submissions in his last 8 fights, so I think it's safe to call him a specialist. But more than just an anaconda choke specialist, he's just got a great front headlock series. It's how he reacts to people trying to take him down. It's the first thing he looks for when he's trying to take someone else down. He'll like mash him into the cage, use the fact that he's taller, get an arm over, start a front headlock, and see what happens. The Ponzinibbio that still punches super hard, like on a one shot for shot basis, could ruin Harris's day. But outside of that, I'm kind of surprised that this fight is a pick'em. I expected Harris to be a substantial favorite. I still see it as a fight where he probably should be a substantial favorite. Like, again, Harris has lost to Shavkat Rakhmonov. None of the things that Rakhmonov did to him have ever been in Ponzinibbio's playbook. And Chaos Williams knocked him out with a punch that maybe no other welterweight in the UFC could throw right now. Like, that's it. Aside from that, Ponzinibbio, his durability is going, his hand speed is going, and hand speed and durability were what made him go during his great win streak. For Ponzi fans, I think this one's going to be kind of a bummer. If you're one of the Carlston Harris fans out there, I don't know if there are any, but if there are, you should have a good night, because I think Harris wins, and I think he wins ugly. I think he either catches Ponzinibbio with like a head kick or a nasty punch combination, and we find just how shot Ponzinibbio's chin really is, or if Ponzinibbio shows some signs of life, I think Harris has proven good at kind of defusing when things aren't going well for him on the feet, just by smothering people in the clinch, just being taller, and just kind of getting his chin off the gunnery range. And again, it's a good launching pad for his front headlock. I could see him, just messing with the front headlock and eventually anaconda choking Ponzinibbio, but I think he gets it done with strikes. Give me Harris by second round TKO here. And I think it will be a case, again, of Ponzinibbio a step behind and probably getting hurt bad by punches he would have kind of shaken off 6 or 7 years ago.
You said you're not sure if there's any Carlton Harris fans. Dev is a huge Carlton Harris guy. He won't stop talking about him. He's trying to start like a fan club for him and have meetings and stuff. So if you're really into Carlton Harris, and reach out to Dev. His phone number is 472. Yeah, just kidding. Ponzinibbio, he was. He was such a fun guy in his prime, and those days are gone. He's still a pretty good high output striker. He's a pressure kickboxer. He pressed the action, but somehow still keeps a distance. He has fairly quick hands, but they're really declining. He's a guy that was always relied on being explosive. It's still there, but not to the same level. He uses a lot of feints to keep his opponents guessing. He measures a lot, which he's good at winning the foot battle, line up his straight right. He attacks the combination with his left hook being his best strike. he still has some punching power at this age. Some good calf kicks. I mean, you got to be worried about his chin, though. I mean, he's taking an ungodly amount of damage. I mean, just look at the shots he was eating from Michel Pereira. To his credit, he was moving forward and trying to make it a battle. But he was just recently knocked out by Kevin Holland, and you have to worry about his durability moving forward. He will wrestle a lot more than people think, but his wrestling is really inconsistent. I mean, he gets takedowns against Jeff Neal and Michel Pereira, but then struggled against Solecki. If he does get the fight, the ground, he needs to improve his top control. Cardio has always been like his biggest ally, but he slowed down. You mentioned against Moreno and Holland. His output dropped against Solecki. Like, those are really bad signs. Harris, I mean, he's got those long arms. I said before, he reminds me of like an Alex Oliveira, where he's got these super long arms. Kind of quirky in that sense. Like, he unorthodox. He works behind a jab. He can be very wild. He throws this weird right hand, overthrows a punch. He does have power. I mean, he showed that against the Kasanga guy. He mixes in wrestling with a striking well. He's a good wrestler, good entries. He likes upper body takedowns, good top control, good top game, moves from position to position. He likes Darce chokes and anaconda chokes. Not a great defensive wrestler. For a weird style guy, he does have a pretty good gas tank. You mentioned the knockout with Chaos Williams. Yeah, Chaos Williams can knock out anybody. You just hope, like, it's not about does he have a weak chin, because he got knocked out by Chaos Williams. You just wonder, you don't want to make sure that chin hasn't been broken because of that. Mm-hmm. I think this is a step down in competition for Ponzinibbio. But more it's definitely a step down in talent, but like, I think this is a pick on because of Ponzinibbio's name. I like Harris here. I think Ponzinibbio will try to make it competitive, but I think Harris's tank, his power, his takedowns, I think it's going to be too much. I think it's going to help him win the second and third round. He might even win the first round. I want to take it. I'm going to say a decision, but it wouldn't shock me if Harris just clips him or like club and subs him. And this is like, just the demise of Ponzinibbio continues. I agree with you. I think Harris should have been like a negative 170 favorite or something like that. So give me Harris by decision.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 249. A strawweight matchup between Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas. Dern, the 31-year-old Brazilian by way of Arizona, or vice versa, 14-5 overall, 9-5 in the UFC. She's coming in off a win. She fought twice last year. The most recent of them was in August, where she took a unanimous decision over Lupi Godinez. Prior to that, she fought last February, dropping a unanimous decision to Amanda Lemos. So Dern, still hovering around the strawweight top 10, has yet to fulfill the promise she once had as the grappling star and super prospect, but she'll look to take a step forward and avenge herself against the woman who handed her first career defeat, Amanda Ribas. Ribas, also 31 years old, Brazilian, 13-5. She is 7-5 in the UFC, and she has alternated wins and losses for her last, I believe, 8 fights, stretching back over 4 years at this point. She's coming in off of a loss. She fought last March in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 53 and dropped a unanimous decision to Rose Namajunas. So she's looking to get back in the win column here. She is favored to do so. In their first fight in October 2019, Dern entered the cage as a minus 200 favorite or so. That is reversed here, as Ribas is minus 200, Dern plus 170. So it's understandable why the odds have flipped, because while neither of these women has taken the world by storm or completely fallen off a cliff since the first time they fought, that almost makes their first fight more relevant, because in broad strokes, they're still pretty similar to the fighters they were back then. And Ribas not only beat Dern and handed her first defeat, but she beat her very convincingly. I mean, won all 3 rounds, no question, and laid a blueprint that some, not all, but some UFC fighters have been able to duplicate. Going into that fight, I want to say Durham was like 6-0, 7-0 at the time, and this was after Ronda Rousey, so we knew that she wasn't just a shoe-in as a future strawweight champ and greatest of all time candidate, because kind of like Rousey, as great as Dern's grappling was, her striking was ugly, which we knew about. We knew about Rousey, and unlike Rousey, who had a basically airtight takedown game if she could get her hands on you, Dern's biggest problem at the time was a lack of consistent ways to get fights to the ground without just, pulling guard. And it was fine in her first couple of fights because the women she was fighting were so overmatched on the ground that, I mean, hell, she could have started like laying on her back and tap these women out. But not only did Ribas deny Dern's takedown attempts over and over again, Ribas also fearlessly took Dern down. It was a statement kind of 3 minutes into the first round where Ribas just did a beautiful judo throw, dumped Dern on her head, and didn't panic, stayed on top, fought off. Like Dern tried to armbar, kept trying to sneak her legs up. Ribas wasn't rattled. She was dropping some punches, won that round, and went on to win the rest of the fight without it spending much time on the ground. I think just because Dern had not had that happen to her before. Now, since then, both women have changed to a certain extent. Like Dern took a year plus off to have a baby, miraculously came back, never having weight problems again. I mean, it's easy to forget that the fight right before the first Dern and Ribas fight was the one where Dern blew weight by 7 pounds in Brazil against Amanda Bobby Cooper at the time. A fight that would not have been allowed to go on in any U.S. jurisdiction. Like, I still think that Dern didn't even try to make weight because they knew that the Brazilian commission was going to let her fight.
Yeah. You know what's funny? Have you ever seen that they've made that fight into like a viral video? Like someone who doesn't follow MMA has made where like Amanda Bobby Cooper gets in her face and Dern like at one point like tries shaking her hand and like Bobby Cooper walks away from her and they like make this whole video to make like Amanda Bobby Cooper like she's a bitch.
Oh yeah, it's like rude fighter gets schooled. Yeah, and
and it's like there's no context to that. Like she's mad that the girl missed weight by 7 freaking pounds.
Yeah, missed weight by more than halfway to the next weight class. Yeah, like, dude, if you just make a video like, our videos get a few thousand views on YouTube. If we just titled it 7 times cocky fighters got smashed, we'd get 1 million views every time.
Yeah.
But we'd be assholes and I couldn't live with myself. Dern's
with a new car and all the money we'd be getting in.
Dern's striking is still ugly. She actually has pretty good power when she lands, interestingly. Like,
I agree.
She kind of, and I think it just comes from 1, swinging real hard, and 2, she just is a strong woman. But for somebody who was literally a world-class, best in the world, at least for, different stretches, athlete in BJJ, she's not much of an athlete. She's kind of flat-footed, slow-footed, hand speed not great. It doesn't really help that she doesn't throw punches as straight or in combination as she should. That's never really changed. She's still not a great traditional wrestler from the outside, but she continues to find sneaky ways to get the fight to the ground without having to shoot through somebody's hips. Just a very Damian Maia type approach, very Juicy Formiga type approach to jiu-jitsu for MMA. She's a slightly evolved version of the fighter she was 5 years ago, and probably still right in her prime physically. Ribas is a whole lot of fun. Like, we've gone like, it used to be a running joke, just like what an absolute like sweetheart she appears to be. And it was really fun when that sweetness covered up the fact that she was kind of mean in the cage. You know, like somebody that like just like constantly giggles as she talks, also like dumps women on their heads and like, you know, punches their face in. Since she's running the top level competition, she's had a much harder go of it. It turns out that her own striking is pretty rudimentary. And while her judo remains very effective, she's one of the few judo fighters that actually uses judo in the cage quite a bit. If that isn't enough to get her opponent on the ground, or if the ground isn't a safe place, even if she gets her opponent there, she struggles. She doesn't really have, you know, a plan B, at least yet. Here, I just don't see any reason why she can't do exactly what she did the first time around. You know, go to the ground once or twice, just to kind of prove a point, give Dern something to think about, like, and then aside from that, just keep it standing and win a mid-tempo, relatively low-power kickboxing battle for the rest of 5 rounds. Just like I say, Dern has improved incrementally, but she hasn't brought out any whole new weapons or tools that make me think this fight is going to go radically different than the first. And sometimes 2 extra rounds makes a difference, but I don't think it makes a huge difference here, because neither of these women have exceptionally terrible or great gas tanks. And unless this fight spends a lot more time on the ground than I think it will, or a lot more time with one or the other fighter trying to get it on the ground, I don't think fatigue is really going to play into it. Like, yeah, I mean, give me Ribas to probably win this thing 49-46 in a fight that proves that she's definitely the superior of these 2 fighters. But aside from that, doesn't teach us a whole lot, because neither one of these women is terribly close to the title picture. Like you mentioned earlier, that there are other fights that could have been further up the card and maybe even above this fight on, you know, as the headliner. The winner of Curtis versus Kopylov, especially if it's Kopylov, might be closer to a title shot than the winner of this fight. For my money, that winner is going to be Amanda Ribas by decision. But yeah, like I'm just thinking again of what you said earlier in the show.
Yeah, this, I mean, without giving away my pick, like I like a lot what you're saying. I mean, to me, Dern is someone who's really starting to turn into somebody that we've broken down so much. And yeah, you said some truth about, like, you know, she physically looks different than she did before she had a baby. And she reminds me of like a better grappling Jillian Robinson, where she's focused on her striking. It just has never really come along. She's still a very weak striker. She's had moments of improvement, but it comes down to that she's not a good athlete. And it holds her back. Her hands are slow. Though, to her credit, I do think her hands look a little faster against Lupe Godinez. But again, sometimes her threat of the grappling will open up some shots. And I thought she was showing signs of some power, but I think that it has actually decreased. Like I think I might have overrated her power a little bit. The only thing worse than her striking offense is probably her striking defense. She keeps. I wasn't even trying to make that like being funny. I just mean, like, she's so hittable. I mean, to her credit, one thing you'll never say is Mackenzie Turner isn't tough. I mean, she'll take a beating and won't give up. She keeps her chin high in the air. She pulls her head straight back. She gets tagged up. I mean, you want to see how tough she is. Just look at the massive shot she gave from Jessica Andrade. I know Andrade like smashed her and everything, but just to, yeah.
Andrade, I mean, kind of like I said about Chaos Williams earlier in the show, but with even more certainty, I'm very certain that Jessica Andrade is the hardest hitting strawweight and the hardest hitting flyweight in women's MMA history.
Yeah, you said Chaos Williams is the hardest hitting male welterweight, or it could be. That's just because Jessica Andrade isn't a 170-pound male. Like, but she can crack. And now she obviously is a wizard on the ground. I mean, she's just as decorative a grappler we've ever seen in both men and women's MMA. I mean, you're talking about 5-time world champion. I mean, we go on and on about her accolades. She gets to fight down, good top game, good back takes. I mean, it's good as we've ever seen in the division. She can get sub from everywhere, great flexibility, can get submissions in weird position. The issue is, and I've said this a million times about grappling, and I just watched a video from a guy who's a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner who used to be a wrestler, and he's done both worlds, and he says, I always get asked, as what should I do first? Should I do BJJ or should I do wrestling? And he's like, well, it depends. Like, what your goals are. But if you're like an adult, it's probably a little too late to learn wrestling. But if you're a kid, he was just, you want to be a better grappler? Go wrestle first. And that's the issue I have with BJJ guys. It's cool that you get the fight to the ground. You can do amazing things. The problem is she can't get the fight to the ground. Her wrestling is terrible. I mean, there's just no setup on her entries. She tries grabbing a single and running the pipe, but she's not that good at it. She used to pull guard or Imanari roll. She just doesn't even do that anymore. And I think that's because she's gotten older and her athleticism has even waned even more. And now she's a weak defensive wrestler. You talked about Hebes taking her down, and I think Dern's all for that. Like, she doesn't care about going to take it down, because she's gonna look sweep or she can get a submission off her back. Hebes is a good athlete. I mean, she moves well. I've said this before. She fights like Alex Volkanovski does on the feet, and I don't mean that in don't super overanalyze that statement, but I mean, like, she's about being fluid. She's about changing the angles, fighting out of both stances, high output, technically sound from distance, got quick hands, accurate, all the things that Volkanovski did. Obviously to a lesser extent, you're talking about different sacks and different, weight and everything. But I think people understand mostly what I'm saying. Kind of getting her opponents guessing what she's doing. Good variety in her attacks. Good at mixing her punches and kicks together well. She throws a lot of kicks, throws some spinning attacks, which I wouldn't do against Dern. I wouldn't give her the chance to jump on her back. Defense has been a little bit of an issue. That's because she doesn't move her head that much. She has a judo background. She likes throws and upper body locks. But sometimes, I mean, people know how I feel about that. I mean, she went for a headlock, which might have cost her the fight against Rose Namajunas if she doesn't go for headlock. If she gets the fight to the ground, she's a good grappler. She's got a good top game. She moves from position to position. Like I said, there wasn't long exchanges, but she was taking down Mackenzie Dern when it was the ultimate. No, you never take this girl down. Yeah. Like, she was the first one to do it, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, what are you doing?" And she was winning grappling exchanges with Mackenzie Dern. Again, just because it worked the first time, I'm not suggesting to do it if I was her coach. You play with fire a little bit. But she's a submission threat that has 4 subs on the record. Got to worry a little about her durability. I mean, she was knocked out by Macy Barbara and Marina Rodriguez. But she just had a war with Rose Namajunas and seemed like that wasn't bothering her. I'm with you, man. I'm all over Hebes. Yeah. The question I say, what has changed from the first fight? And you kind of said that in the intro, and I'm just echoing it. Like, Dern has not shown me anything. Like, yeah, could she catch a submission in a scramble? Yeah, absolutely. But if he was just sticks and moves, Dern's gonna spend the majority of the time chasing her and just eating punches. When Dern closes the distance, gets the clinch, I think it's more likely Hebes gets the takedown, and then what I would do is get a takedown, then just disengage, and then continue to pick her apart on the feet. Now this is going to sound like, what the hell are you saying? Because I'm going to play both sides of the fence right now. I think 25 minutes favors Hebes, as in where I expect her to win the 4th and 5th round. Like, I think as the deeper the fight goes on, the more it's going to, she's going to show that she's, class above. That said, having 2 rounds actually also helps Dern because it gives her another 10 minutes to try to catch a submission. Like she could lose the entire fight and just have that moment. So like, so I want to say like, I expect Ribas to really blow her away, but she still has to spend 10 more minutes of trying to be safe. I think she does. I think this is a pretty easy win for Ribas. Give me Ribas by 50-45 decision.
There you have it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 249, Dern versus Ribas 2, also known as UFC Vegas 101. I've been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, you've gotten 2025 off to a good start. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We try to bring a mix of actual in-depth analysis and occasional humorous or historic asides that we think is pretty unique in this industry. Please give us a like, subscribe. None of those things cost you anything. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to continue bringing you this content for free. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. We do have our first consensus upset pick of the year, but if you think we missed any hidden gold elsewhere, let us know. Because if you're right and we're wrong, we will give you all of your credit on the recap. Just need to come join us. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We will talk about all 14 of these fights from the top down, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time, so we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Happy New Year, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. Make your bed of fairy tales while you're